Welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Supercoach podcast. You're on again this week with JB, and I'm joined by the illustrious Pistol. Hello.
How you doing, JB? I feel like it's been an absolutely mad weekend full of games. Your head must be spinning.
My head is spinning, actually. I've called a doctor about it. He doesn't know how to treat it, but essentially it is just non-stop spinning. So if I have to pause between reading stuff off my screen, it's just because I have to wait to get all the way back around. But essentially there has been so much information, too much information in fact, and what usually is a period of crossing players off of our wish list, all I've done is add players to my wish list this preseason. So we have a lot to talk about. So this podcast is essentially going to be about going through each game and just looking at the real Supercoach relevant players. We're hoping to get this in under, or I hope we get it in under an hour and a half. I think that would be ideal. But there's just so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about. We're going to try our best. And in that spirit, I'm going to quickly go through the housekeeping that we have here. So obviously, firstly, we've got some new Patreon signups. So thank you very much to Wade Carpenter, Bradley Pratt, Nick Hunter, Glenn McAuliffe, I'm going to back that, Matthew Billy, Dennis Denuto, Dan Ahern, Jack Mahoff, I don't know about that one, Jezza, Bruce Walker for like the 13th time, stop making new accounts, Bruce, Larry Bird, the great Larry Bird, who shot jumped left-handed for a game, Miles McNair, John Nicholson, Jaden, Adam Marchant. I'm going to go Marchant. Nathan Custerson, Cam McDonald, John Apostolopoulos, Bryce, Guarav Bawa, and Ben Muddy.
Great.
Welcome.
Yeah, a couple of familiar names. Good to have you guys back, and thanks for the newcomers as well. It's right time, right before the preseason, that's for sure.
But was the familiar name John Apostolopoulos?
No. Was it meant to be?
I just wanted to pronounce it a second time to prove I could do it.
Okay. Well,
Apostolopoulos.
I think we're done with the names, but thank you. I'm going to move on to the Cancer Council to stop JB from talking. Thank you to the couple of donations that we got last week. To Maz, who says belated payment on the Cancer Council losing bets. Keep track of them and lump sum them for maximum pain. A payment for a loss to Benny Buzz Boys for my Eagles defeating Essendon. Unbelievable. That was unbelievable. At least the other bet of Sydney versus West Coast season finish was more enjoyable. Your penalty is yet to be decided. Another one from Maz says belated payment on Cancer Council losing bets. Keep track of them and lump sum for max pain. Payment for an FPL player bet to Matt W. All I've learnt so far is everyone should be betting with Maz. The next donation, thanks for a very generous donation from Kayla Yilmaz. There's a lot of Mazes in here, but thank you very much for your generous donation. No comments. And Gibbo for being the worst team in Slackers Dynasty NFL.
Whoa, he hasn't even written that. You've just gone off the cuff there. That's not very nice.
It's definitely not off the cuff. But we are, it looks like 115, some would say, dollars short of the 25K mark now. For some reason, I thought we hit that last season, so I'm not sure what's going on. But still, very close, which is awesome, JB. Thanks, everyone, for your generous donations.
You're welcome. Having said that, we're going to jump straight into the games. I genuinely think we can get this done in less than an hour and a half, so stop waffling, Pistol.
Okay.
We're going to dive straight into the first game, which is your team defeating Hawthorn, Collingwood versus Hawks. A close game. First of all, I just want to put some context into the games. I know this is actually adding to the runtime rather than taking away, but I want to put a bit of context into it. So a very close game, a one-goal game. Do you think the closeness of this game is going to be reflective of what we see during the season? Just to put a little bit of context on it, or like where do you see these teams? How far do you see them apart on the ladder? Do we think maybe one of the teams over or underperformed?
Yeah, far apart from each other on the ladder. One down the bottom and one up top, and I'm not going to say which one. No, look, the way that the match worked was Collingwood would run away from it, and then Hawthorn would try and fight back, and then Collingwood would run away from it, and then Hawthorn would fight back, and it was kind of, I think Collingwood, they weren't playing with their opponents. They were more once they got farther in front, they decided, we can like trial things, some test things, let's see what we can do. And then Hawks would kind of come back, and it wasn't really putting, pedal to the metal 100% all the way down. So I think, it was a fun, high-scoring game, and I do expect that from Collingwood throughout the year. And I think Hawthorn will have high-scoring games, but it just might be their opponents kicking the high scores, JB.
Yes, this is why I asked, because I think it actually is important as to how the game script went and how we expect it to go. So I don't expect Hawthorn to be this competitive against the better teams. However, they only got 1 ton for the match, which I also don't expect to continue. I expect there to be obviously a much higher ratio of players getting better scores, but they did have a few players that only played low time on ground, which obviously affected the higher ends as well, which is important to remember. So that they can use extra players, and those players coming in and getting 30, 40, 50%, and 30 to 20 to 30 points essentially does affect how the top end scale as well. But James Worpel is the highest scorer for Hawthorn. He scored 101 Supercoach with his 30 touches. Just the 1 tackle, which surprised me a bit. Did hit the scoreboard for 1 behind, but 624 metres gained and 17 contested disposals, I think is probably are the 2 things that stand out for me. How do you see Worpel? He's about 300k. If he has this role all year, and we're talking, I think he was 3rd in their CBAs. I'm not quite sure, but he was top 4.
Yeah.
Do you see him being a player that makes us the appropriate amount of money to start him?
Yeah, so their midfield mix was Newcomb is clearly the number 1 man. He had majority of the CBAs. Interestingly enough, we had Cam McKenzie as their second, I guess, big mid. And then it fell kind of to a pretty much perfect split between Worpel and Will Day as the other 2. And then they kind of had some rotational players like Josh Ward and C-Mac, Connor McDonald, Connor Nash kind of coming in to the side. I think we also need to consider that Finn McGuinness tagged Nick Dacos, but Dacos stayed out of the midfield, so therefore Finn McGuinness stayed out of the midfield. Potentially, if there was a midfielder he was tagging, maybe Finn McGuinness eats up some more of those CBAs as well. So in terms of midfield sort of split, this might be what I would consider maybe not on the higher end for Worpel, but it'll be roughly what he received. But he looked outstanding this week, completely different than how he looked in the previous week. I still have concerns over his efficiency. He really was booting the ball long at nearly every time that he could. 63% disposal efficiency for the game. But when you get 17 contested possessions and 9 clearances, doesn't matter as much. You're going to score bulk points. I think, JB, I had a green flag in that his price at 309k makes him... I'd say it's a very realistic target of him making 150k. My red flag would be that I don't really see how he could have a better game, pretty much, than 30 touches, 17 contested possessions, 9 clearances. Like, that's a massive game, and this was a tight game for Hawks as well, which they probably get blown out of the water more often than not throughout the season. So if this is a tight game and he's done that well, is this kind of on that upper echelon of his scoring for the rest of the season?
Well, I'm not quite sure. So he averages 4.3 tackles over his career, and he only got the 1 in this game. So I think that likely is a place that we can see that'll improve as the season starts. But you're right. In terms of the meters gained, contested disposals, clearances, it's all pretty top draw stuff. He only had 5 clangers, 2 of which were free kicks. Does the behind count as a clanger?
Not a clanger, just not effective. Yeah.
So only 3 live ball clangers, which I think is interesting as well. I would imagine his numbers there might increase as the season goes, but that's obviously just guessing. I just think it's interesting because he's not the type of guy who spreads and gets bulk marks. He only had the 2 this game, so I don't really see that budging. But he does seem like the type of guy who could pepper the 25 to 30 disposal mark, increase the tackling a little bit, and then just circumstantially go between 80 and 110, like most weeks. I actually see that for him. I think having the CBA role and having it without O'Meara or Tom Mitchell sort of pushing him out to majority half forward or wherever he's playing, I think he's really good for his floor, and that is what will essentially propel him to to make the coins this year. So Warple actually found his way into my team after this match. So I'm not. He's not completely entirely locked in, key thrown away, but I enjoyed the role a lot. And if he gets that in the first month, then I think he's definitely capable of making the money.
The role's good. I just keep in mind his disposal efficiency can reduce his floor considerably. Like he could have a game in the 50s or 60s purely because he just can't hit a target the whole day. And what they did in the previous week was they got frustrated with him missing targets and they played him forward for the second half. In this fourth quarter, he played majority forward, but I don't think it was out of frustration. I think it was just giving other people a go, sort of in the midfield. But it's on the cards.
That is also scope to improve the score. He played majority forward in the last quarter and only had 67%.
But he's not the number one mid,
of those
so you wouldn't expect him to be getting 4 quarters CBAs. Even though he was dominating, they still put him forward. I don't know. I'm not. I think he's fine and he'll do the job. I just wouldn't be thinking this is like
not an uber premium.
It's not a slam dunk pick.
Yeah, 110. Yeah, I agree. Cam McKenzie's the next guy. I don't think we really need to have
slam dunk
discussion. 99 SuperCoach, 73 time on ground. That's. I mean,
CBAs just great.
He had CBAs. He was incredible. James Sicily played more of a lockdown role. He had 96 SuperCoach. 10 marks in his 26 disposals, took a few of the kickouts as well, which was a big tick, but shared them with a couple of other players. I think mostly with Sicily, you look at the TOG, 93%, so this is a full game scenario for him. And I think 96 is probably about where we expect him to pepper, or we expect that to at least be the floor that he peppers in games. I don't like that he was playing as a tall defender in this game.
I mean, I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I thought Sicily was terrible outside of one quarter. I thought he was really bad. He had a 52-point quarter in the third, I believe. But
is that really abnormal to what he showed us last year?
That's the thing, right? Like, he can be bad and still score 96, and you're like, man, he just doesn't have a bad SuperCoach scoring week because he can just be terrible and then still end up nearly tonning up, which I think is a positive in that it doesn't kind of matter where he gets thrown or what happens in the game. He just finds ways to get around a ton. And like, that's usually a midfielder type thing that, the good mids will find ways to score. But he's got that kind of ability as a defender. And I think that in itself is really appealing. He might not be the greatest value selection, but you're going to get a really safe selection if you want to pay up for him. And I think there's kind of value in the safety, if that makes sense.
Hawthorn do have a really good start to the season in terms of SuperCoach points potential. So I do like the pick if you want to get an early flash in the pan. Oh my God, everyone's going to panic to get this guy in 4 weeks' time because of their start.
And he didn't move forward.
I don't think he will be moving forward.
No forward time, which is good.
I personally do see him as someone who will just appear to us at 580k at some point.
So expensive for a defender.
I know, but he's 625k now. So I'm just saying, I think there's discount to be had. I don't think in terms of value, I don't think he ticks that box at the very least, which a lot of people are going for this season. Now, I'm going to skip down the list a little bit here. You might want to pull me back at some point, but Will Day's the next one here that I wanted to talk about. 88 SuperCoach, you did mention him as being the next CBA midfielder behind James Warple. 20 disposals, 5 marks, 2 tackles. His frame just does not look like it's capable of dominating a midfield yet, but in just 68% time on ground, 88 SuperCoach, that's enough. Like, if he does that for the season, which he's not going to just pepper that exact number for the season, but if he does get around that, then he's close to making his money. But at the very least, he strikes that balance between providing points and not quite enough money, but also not being a guilt-free, pseudo premium that you have to hold on to and sort of don't want to upgrade. So I think he really could play that role, but I don't see him doing an 88 most weeks. I see him having a much lower floor than that.
I think it's a massive trap pick, personally. He needs to make that 150k, he needs to just average, I think, a touch over 90, and he's going to be way too inconsistent to do that. I don't think he's going to have the ceiling, those 130 plus games, and I do think he has the floor to go in the 50s if he just has a terrible game. So for those reasons, if he's not going to make you unlikely to make you the money and not have that strong of an average, I think it's a dead pick. It's just kind of filling a spot in people's teams because they don't know what else to do with it. But it's not one I would recommend.
Now, we want to talk about good Supercoach and Dream Team ratios. Fergus Green, 84 Supercoach from 67 Dream Team. He had the 8 disposals, 5 of which were marks, 5 of which were converted into goal or scoring opportunities, at least 3 goals too by the end of the match. He had 81% TOG. He is absolutely going to be in their best 22. He's starting in their forward line. How would you describe him? He's not a tall forward. He's not
Gunston.
a Ben King. Gunston is a perfect description. He's that medium player who plays tall but can sort of handle himself at ground level. I don't expect him to get a lot of crumbing, snapping goals or anything, but he's not a truck either. So I think he has the potential to make his money
easy.
Like he'll get spike games and he'll make his money easy. He's one that we're locking away.
Yeah, he's actually really good. Like at both games in the match sim last week, just him leading from the forward 50 a bit up the ground and then taking the chest mark. He would do that a couple of times a game, and that's good for Supercoach points marking on the lead. So he is very capable, and I believe he's probably the strongest forward bench rookie option we have.
Yeah, I think so as well. We're going to talk about another one who's probably as strong, but maybe might be best utilised in the midfield. But he just kind of reminds me of like a smaller Jacob Kajitsky. And we know how well he was and how well he did in his first year, with a couple of spike scores as well. And I just think they try to feed those guys. So I think he's a really easy pick. Now, lastly, Henry Hustwaite only played the 33% TOG. I think a lot of people were kind of had the expectation that he might be best 22 as well. I think based on what we've seen, it's unlikely.
It's a year away.
Yeah.
At least.
That's going to do me with Hawthorn.
Dylan Moore.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Dylan Moore. Only played the first half and scored 70 Supercoach in the first half. He is the hottest first quarter starter as from last year in the AFL. I think maybe the hottest halftime. I'm not sure about that one, but definitely was first quarter and did it again. He just kicks goals for fun in the first half of games and scores really well. He didn't get any midfield time. If people are selecting him with that in mind, that's not what's going to be happening. He's still playing that half forward role. Is just incredibly good. He's like underratedly incredibly good footballer. So yeah, that's all there is there. Is he going to start putting it into a second half and being relevant, or not quite yet? I think Hawthorn will struggle too much this season to, for him to be fed enough to score really well. I think if we were looking at, a top 8 side, I would consider selecting him. But, looking at a bottom 4 side, most likely, I don't think he's an option, but he's definitely a good draft option.
Right, for Collingwood, we're going to start with Tom Mitchell. He scored 101 Supercoach with 28 disposals, 20 of which were handballs. He had 4 marks, 5 tackles, 16 contested possessions. He played well, I guess, but how much better do we expect him to do? He only just snuck over the ton. This was pretty much his best game I could expect from Tom Mitchell, and I was really pleased as a Collingwood player. Played his role to absolute perfection. 28 touches, 107 metres gained, which is not much, 16 contested possessions. What he was doing was he would get the contested possession, as we would expect, shovel out that handball, as we would expect, to the running Degoe so many times, or Crisp, or Adams, or whoever was around him, and they would do the running, and he would just kind of get it out there. And that will very much limit his outside game. And with a limited outside game, I think this sort of 101 mark is probably what he's going to average for the season. And I don't think that's enough value to select him. I think that's 30K. He has probably 30K of value in him, which I don't think is enough when a lot of midfielders have, I think, a little bit more. And he's not going to become a top end primo. So not here nor there, but definitely played his role really well and excited me as a Collingwood spotter. I think the 5 tackles is what people were looking to tick off as to whether he was still tackling well and getting the disposals. He did tick the tackling box, but as you said, we're looking at someone who's going to pepper the ton, and his high scores I think are going to go from 140 to 115.
Yep.
And we're just going to see somebody averages about 100, 105. So absolutely not a selection in my opinion. Darcy Cameron split the ruck time 50-50 with Mason Cox.
Not even 50-50.
Was it less?
37.5 CBA's percent.
Oh, so about 60-40.
Yeah, it's not good.
He had 97 Supercoach though, 11 kicks, no handballs. Loves a kick at the footy. 18 hitouts, didn't kick a goal. I think this was a super positive game in terms of, can we start Darcy Cameron? I thought the answer to that before the game was no. I think the answer to that after the game is like circumstantially, you could talk yourself into Darcy Cameron just to start the year. If he's playing a similar role and his floor is still 70, playing about 60-40, then I think he still does what you want him to do. But the problem is like you have to get through your head that he's just not going to be a premium option. Like he went from 20% chance to 0. And I think that was a lot of his allure before we saw the ruck split. So what do you think? Is there still scope to start Darcy Cameron?
I like to watch these games, and when I'm ranking what I'm looking for in the games, it's eye test number 1, how they're looking, how they're playing, how they're moving, role number 2, and then the third most important thing is Supercoach points. Like, it's not that important. And when I see a guy that's not the number 1 ruck, it doesn't really matter that he scored 97 to me. The role's just not there for him to be a selection for me in my side. But he played very well. So eye test wise, definitely passed. And that makes me think in the future, it is possible that Cox could be displaced from Collingwood's best 22. And if that were to happen, I would happily jump on Cameron. I just don't think I can start him, while Cox is still named. If Cox isn't named round 1, I will start Cameron.
I always shudder and sort of flinch a little bit when you say his surname, just with your history. Nick Dacos, the next one, he scored 72 Supercoach with only 58 dreams, by the way, good ratio. He had the 17 disposals, 5 tackles, no marks for the game, 3 contested possessions, just the 1 clearance. Only had a few CBAs, and was, as you mentioned, heavily tagged by Finn McGuinness. Now, this is one of the heaviest tags that you can get in the game. And after the match, Sam Mitchell said, get used to it. I agree, Sam Mitchell. I think he should get used to it. But it's not like he performed like to a point where you absolutely vomit and can't possibly have this player in because his floor is 50 with a tag. 72 playing out of defense with a tag is still good enough if the ceiling is good enough. What did you think on Nick Dacos?
So essentially, they stuck a tag on him and then said, "You figure it out. We're not going to help you structurally. We're not going to fling you all over the ground to help you break the tag. You just use this game as a practice game and try and break it." And he couldn't do it. It's as simple as that. He's not at that level yet where he's going to be freely able to break tags. Like, he's obviously extremely talented, but the tags are going to get him. And once he's gotten beaten like this, it puts a loud, flashing red flag that, hey, we can sit somebody on him and take him out of the game and, reduce his influence. And he's going to cop it more than almost any other player, I think, in the AFL coming into this season, because it's just clearly something he's, needs to get better at. But from a Supercoach perspective, that to me just screams not this year for Dacos, maybe next year. With his massive ownership, I'm actually feeling good about his ownership being so big, because he is going to get tagged. I mean, he will have those 130 plus games when he's not tagged, but I don't think it's going to make up for the amount of times that he does cop the tag. And to be honest, last week in the midfield, he wasn't as good as I had hoped he would be in the midfield. And whilst he didn't get any midfield time this week, his role is still going to be changed week by week. So whether or not he's being tagged, like last week he wasn't being tagged and then had a lot of wing time, some half forward, a lot of the CBAs, a lot of the back. It's just too much going on in the Pies midfield for me to have any confidence in him as a selection at this stage of the year.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I had Dacos for a hefty part of the preseason prior to the practice matches, but the more you talk about a tag, the more you look into his tagged games last season, the more it's evident that at the very least you're going to get him close to the low 500s anyway, due to the tags. And if he's damaging you that much as a non-owner, I think it's only a matter of time before you can just do the sideways and sort of upgrade to him at a cheap price anyway. So I think that pretty much summarises Collingwood. I don't really have anyone else to talk about here.
I think we can have DPP watches on some of the midfielders because we were using so many through the midfield. there's sneaky chances that some of these guys might just happen to get DPP throughout the year. So I guess that's a more wait and see, not something we need to worry about for round one.
It's weird that you brought it up now then. We're going to go into the next game.
Do you want me to expand that, JB?
No, I don't.
We have to keep an eye out on the DPP incoming.
I didn't want you to say it in the first place,
because we have
let alone expand.
A certain amount of forward slots.
Fremantle versus Port Adelaide was the next match as Fremantle defeated Port Adelaide. I don't think we need to add extra context into this one. Fremantle are a good side. I think Port Adelaide were a little bit experimental, but this isn't far off of what we expect to see during the season anyway. Maybe not by that margin, but I think we expect Fremantle to be good this year. So we're going to start with Fremantle, and Sean Darcy, 127 Supercoach points, 38 hitouts, took the absolute you-know-what out of the Port Adelaide ruckman, Lysette, and to a certain extent Teakle, but mostly Lysette. 127 Supercoach points is mammoth. Is he on your radar? Is he in your team?
Yeah, he's in my team. I'm not in love with the pick, but I think he's the best of a bad bunch at this stage. I mean, you can argue a couple other rucks as well, but to be honest, when you watch him play, you just sometimes think that, there's going to be games where he's just so much better than the opposition ruckman that even if he doesn't do that much around the ground, he's just going to score so many points from the hitouts because he's just such a big boy. And that was pretty much a case. Lysette just got monstered, and then he tried to use Teakle and he got monstered. And Darcy's just feasting. I know Jackson didn't play, so we're not going to see that ruck split. But again, it just makes me think with that early Fremantle draw, that's quite generous. And Jackson coming back from injury, Darcy's probably going to get off to a hot start. And if that's the case, I'd rather be on than off. So that's basically in a nutshell.
And the week before, the split was like 70-30 or something like that, or something crazy. It's still very good for Darcy, who's also in my team. I just love his ceiling. I think last year, I know this is obviously part of his issue, is that he was very niggly and he had a knee that he just couldn't get over all season. And Meek, when he played, was for some reason their first ruck over Darcy. I just don't see those things happening this year. I think he's clearly ahead of Jackson in terms of rucks. I think there are times where Jackson might suit a ruckman better and maybe Darcy plays a little less ruck in those games. But realistically, I think his big is going to be real big.
Yeah.
So I like him as much as any other ruckman. Going to move on to Nat Fyfe, 90 Supercoach points, 15 disposals, 3 goals. Now, the concerning thing for me is he had 3 goals too, so 5 scoring shots. He also handled or kicked a couple off to teammates, had a couple of score assists. 90 Supercoach points for that type of output. That's a good game for a forward. And Fyfe's a good player, but I don't see where, does he get 20 touches and 5 goals now to sort of get to the 120 mark? Is that what we need from Fyfe now? I don't think he did enough for me at his price to say, all right, he has to be in my team.
I think I'm trying not to overthink this one. I think it's as simple as he's 316k. He needs 85 odd to make 150k, and he's probably capable of doing that. So he's not like a sexy pick in any sort of way. I don't think he's going to be. I'm quite sure he's not going to be a keeper. I'm quite sure he's not going to exceed expectations. He's just going to do exactly what we expect and make you the money, and then get out of your team. And that's all that I'm expecting from the kick. Doesn't make him a bad pick. Just it's not a very exciting one.
Sam Sturt scored 80 from 8 disposals, which is a very good ratio. He had a couple of goals and 100% disposal efficiency. He's one that probably looks to start the year, but I think a few people have concerns over Frederick, who should be returning before long, and they've got someone else. I know O'Driscoll's on the sideline as well right now, but I think they've got another forward who is on the sidelines as well. So essentially, how many games can we see from Sturt? Is he just going to play himself in again, or is he someone who's going to be in and out too often to start?
I like picking people that have had years in the AFL system, and Sturt being in his 3rd year is, I think, a good sign, and we know he can score well in Supercoach. I think he started with a ton in his first game, and then he backed it up with a terrible score, and then a good score, and then a terrible score, or something like that, and then didn't play again for memory. But he has enough of a ceiling as a rookie that he can make money. It's just about that job security. And as you said, he can play himself in. And with Fremantle's, I guess, decent early draw, it could very much well be a case of, well, he only gets 6 games, but he makes 150K in those 6 games, and that's all we need him for in the first place.
Yeah, I think there's a good enough options outside of Sturt that you don't need to take the risk, but I completely understand why. And like you said, those extra years in the system do tend to help a player, especially with their body and their longevity as the season or as the game goes on a game-by-game basis, more so getting out 4 quarters. Hayden Young's the next guy. He scored 79 from 19 disposals. He's now had 2 opportunities without Luke Ryan to show that he's that guy, and I don't think he's even showed a glimpse of it, to be honest, at this stage. So it's impossible to start him from my perspective, but I still wouldn't be surprised to see him improve to a point in which we're considering him later in the season.
Yeah, maybe later in the season. I think that's the only case. JB, Andrew Brayshaw had 36 touches, but also had 9 clangers. Is he been on your radar at all this preseason?
Oh, I did skip past him. No, not for me. I don't understand. Like, I think it's just trying to get fancy for the sake of getting fancy. Is picking someone like Andrew Brayshaw. We've clearly seen that he struggles with tags, and they've got a good start to the year in terms of fixtures. But generally speaking, it's the bad teams that do the tagging, and I don't think he has a good start to the year in terms of taggers.
I think it's just first game, he's got a bad tag, and then it's a decent run.
Who's the first game? Is that West Coast or is it Hawthorn?
I had it open, I just accidentally closed it. It is St Kilda, yeah. The Windhager tag, if he's there, or Burns, or whoever is going to tag in round 1.
Yep. Okay, well, realistically, that's his issue, and that's why I'm not going to start him. Essentially.
What about the 9 clangers? That's not the issue?
No, it's not. It's not the main issue.
It's a problem.
It might be an issue, yeah. 36 disposals and a third of them are clangers, but I think we've got a couple of other guys to just quickly touch on. Liam Henry, 200k forward, scored 75 on a wing. He looks to be pretty comfortable on that wing, but Nathan O'Driscoll, as I said, is not in the team. There's going to be a bit of a shift. I don't know exactly what's going to happen with their side. I find it really difficult to trust their rookies.
Yeah, let's just jump to Port.
You don't want to talk about Liam Henry?
Not really.
75.
Not really. I think there's
also Matthew Johnson, 24% time on ground, so okay. I think we can rule that one out. Okay, Port. Rosie, 111 Supercoach, 25 disposals, played predominantly midfield. He had 92% TOG, 80% CBAs, just ridiculous numbers. It was one of our best. I don't think I really need to discuss Connor Rosie, do I?
No, I think he's pretty much locked himself into all of our sides.
Good. Horn Francis got a predominant midfield role again for 70. He had 9 clangers. There is no way Horn Francis plays a game this year where he doesn't get like too many clangers to like be good enough in Supercoach, I guess is a weird way of phrasing that. But
6 free kicks against.
He's just a clanger machine. Whether it's by foot or whether it's by giving away frees or 50-metre penalties, you cannot start this guy, this player, this person, this human. You cannot start him. Please don't put him into your sides.
He was leading your CBA. Is he your number 1 CBA mid? No, what's going on? 2 weeks in a row.
No, he didn't lead it this week. I think
he's been very high CBA.
Yeah. He led it last week, and I think he was 2nd or 3rd this week.
That's crazy.
No, it's Rosie and Ollie Wines are the main 2, and then it's likely between Boak, Horn Francis, Butters, and like whether Drew's best 22. I don't know. There's a few other guys that'll go through there, but I don't expect that third person to get heavy minutes. But Wines and Rosie, I think, are pretty safe to get heavy minutes.
Okay. Well, talk to me about Bergman. 374k. I'm only mentioning him. I know people are like, oh, who? He scored 119 Supercoach points, but it wasn't just his score. He was really good on the eye test the previous week as well. So he's backed up a really good game. Not
just that week either. I went and saw the intra-club match, and Bergman was our... If Rosie wasn't on the field, it was Bergman was best on ground. He was so good, but he occupies a wing. I don't think he has the pedigree to be good enough in Supercoach this year from a wing. But
I tell you what, 3 games in a row being really good.
I know, and he was drafted high. He has all the tools, but players don't average well for wings. Amon, for example, who has been like All-Australian squad or very, very, very cusp All-Australian squad in the last few years, has only really averaged between 90 and 95 in that time. So
times are changing, JB. The game's shifting. It's more fast paced, maybe more spread. I don't know.
If he was 60k cheaper, he would be in my side right now.
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
but he's not. So he's not in my side.
He's barely in any teams as well. I think he's definitely someone that he's a draft pick for sure.
He's a keeper draft pick, by the way. If you do those.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But it's a bit exciting.
Under the radar.
A little bit exciting.
I can't believe you detoured me for that. You wouldn't talk about Matthew Johnson or Liam Henry, but you want to talk about Bergman.
Yeah, because the eye test. It's been great. He's been really good.
Okay, well, Zach Butters didn't pass the eye test. He looked like someone coming back from a bit of a niggle injury.
Oh, God.
Played a lot of forward, didn't play a lot of CBAs, 67 SuperCoach points. How is anyone starting this pick?
Let's move on. Don't even need to finish the sentence.
Okay. What sort of podcast is this? Are we just giving yes or no
5
answer
minutes
on
in.
players?
We've got two games out of 9.
I know.
Let's get a move on.
I know. Okay. Well, Scott Lysette also. Do not start Scott Lysette, please.
And why? This one I need explanation for.
Oh, now you want to talk.
Yeah, because now it's a player that's in a large percentage of sides. Come on.
Well, he scored 36 in 60% TOG, and he's just not good enough.
It's just not a good enough player.
No, and there's every opportunity for Port to go Finlayson and Teakle combination if we do want to be more mobile, and that just means Lysette's just not in the best 22.
Does Finlayson locked in your best 22?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. I thought so, but he's... I
thought he would be
about it.
I thought he would be directly exchanging with Teakle, but there is every chance we don't like what Lysette brings and we want the more versatile, agile ruckman.
All right, Finlayson in my team. No, kidding. Okay, let's... anyone else catch your eye? Francis Evans or anything?
No, they didn't.
Okay, awesome.
Let's move on.
That's great. I'd love to.
Brisbane versus Geelong is the next game. Brisbane smoking Geelong. We don't need to talk about Josh Dunkley. I'm not even going to mention him.
So
Lachie
good.
Neale, too good. If you don't have Josh Dunkley, then please tune out. Lachie Neale, 121 SuperCoach. I think it's gone underrated that he's as good as anyone else in the game when he's at his best. I still think he's slightly behind the 700k allure of Rory Laird, but whether you're going for the slightly cheaper Bond or you want to pay up for Lachie Neale, I don't think I can talk anyone off of this pick. He's going to have such a good season.
I think he's fantastic. If I was picking 3 600k mid guys, he would be my third one.
The third, yeah. I 100% agree. Having a look through, you have to go all the way down to McKenna and Wilmot for the next sort of relevance here. I'm very curious about these guys. So both of them scored, they scored 53 and 52 respectively. McKenna outscoring Wilmot there. McKenna had 14 touches, Wilmot had 9. Wilmot occupied more of a wing from what I understand, and McKenna was more out of halfback.
Yep. Neither
Neither of them really good enough. But I guess Wilmot is because he's only 120k, but McKenna's 170k. Is there, are you starting both? One of these guys, neither of these guys? Where do you sit with them? Because the backline, I think, it's a bit interesting with who plays or how much people are spending on their bench or not spending on their bench.
If I had to pick one, I'd probably pick McKenna purely based on the role is better. And I know he had 5 clangers in this game, so not, that's quite a lot of clangers. I think usually he could pepper the 60 mark and he still makes his money going 60 at his price. So I would pick him if I'm choosing just one of them, but you have to take into account the 30k, and for that reason McKenna isn't
40.
in my team, 40k, and Wilmot is sitting on my bench. I don't think he's a fieldable option. I think he's sitting in most of our benches, and I would stress not to have him on field because that will very significantly impact your scoring potential.
Do you think he's a safe best 22 for at least the first few weeks?
I don't.
Really? Because he came into that finals team and he was in their best 15 players of that match. He looked incredible. I think he actually does. I think the fact that they're putting him on a wing, which is not his natural position.
But that's where they want to use him.
I don't think... I think ideally they use him at halfback though, right?
But they're just not spots back there. They're still
I think they landed McKenna and that's what sort of forced Wilmot to a wing. But the fact that they've still made a spot for him sort of speaks to the fact that they obviously rate him and they want him in the best 22.
Well, they
I think
don't have
good
good wingers, so that's more of the issue. They have like Tunstall still running on half forward / wing, and then they're like, we need another guy. So they're kind of just throwing the bottom end Brisbane players through the wing. I guess it's not as damaging of a, like, you're not going to be exposed by having that poor of a wing, so easy to hide away someone there.
And at least he's got a defensive side already built in, so he's not going to,
So that's kind of how I see it.
Over to Geelong.
Will Ashcroft.
No, we don't need to talk about Will Ashcroft. Tanner Bruin for Geelong, 112 Supercoach points, 19 disposals. Had sort of a 50-50 role between half forward and midfield, like we're talking CBAs.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on Bruin? Because to me, this looks like a fast out the blocks. I've got a lot to prove. I'm at a new club. They've given me this, semi-lucrative role, but do we see him averaging 80, 85 for the whole season to make his money? That to me seems like it could be a little bit too far.
Yeah, so a real head versus heart pick for me for this one. So I watched him last week against Hawthorn and thought that he was the BOG. He
passed the eye test by far, both matches.
He was just so good last week. I can't really stress how good he was. He was the number one mid for the game for them, and he dominated and looked amazing. So I was watching him this week thinking, okay, I just need to see that he can somewhat back it up. And whilst they got still slaughtered by Brisbane, I mean, Bruin is just really good. He passed the eye test again. The role isn't great. That's the only concern. 50-50 is not amazing, but when he's in there, he had 5 clearances and 7 tackles.
7 tackles is massive.
It's huge, and no wonder he scored 112. I'm not surprised that his dream team was low and his Supercoach was really high, but the concern is the role. He's just looking amazing, and he didn't even have a mark, so there's still upside there. And what happens in games where Geelong win, which is going to be more often than not, and he's playing half forward, he's probably kicking goals then. The ball's going to be around there more often. They just lost this one. So I have him in my side. Mostly, he was in my side before this game, but I have him in my side. But then I think of what you just said and how likely is it that he goes 85 plus, and there is significant risk in that. He very well could just go, sub 80. His floor is really low. He could be a really, really bad pick. I think for me, right now, he's in my side with me thinking, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll trade him at round 2. But I kind of have to, you kind of have to make a decision on it. You're either in and trading him round 2, or you're in and you're going to the moon with him. It's not a pick for the faint-hearted, let's put it that way.
I find it very interesting because, it's not just that the role isn't perfect. I think it's still good enough, but it's not perfect. But it's also he's playing for Geelong, and Geelong are going to be trying to go back to back and win another flag. I really think there's no room for error. There's very little room to operate. If he is just not getting it done in that midfield, he can so easily come out.
Yep.
And not just for a game, but for a month.
That's right.
And I think that's the huge concern, is that you're really backing the talent to shine through. And I like Bruin. I think he's a good player, but I don't think he's safe enough to back in for a 2-month period or a 6-week period or 4-week period, wherever you think he makes the money, in this side when they're fully fit and healthy. So I just think that's probably a bit too much of a hard sell for me.
Yeah.
But I completely understand the pick, and
it's hard.
I'm not going to talk anyone off of it, is what I was going to try and say.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I think it's just hard because, he feels like the most talented midfielder that they have now. You look at Holmes and
Patrick
even
Dangerfield's pretty decent.
Yeah, he still can't kick super well. I'll say that quietly under my breath, but
Dangerfield's better.
But Dangerfield's better. But
they need
he's aging, and they need they'll probably ramp up
course.
Dangerfield for the finals. That's when they get him into form, and he kind of is in cruise control before then. And it just feels like now is a time that Geelong need to be investing in that talent, in that young midfield that they have, and Bruin feels like just the best one, so the one that you'd want to invest in the most. At least that's what it looked like to me.
I also want to point out Cam Guthrie, who's not like ancient.
He's pretty old.
He's better than Bruin as well.
He's pretty old though.
He still had 22 touches, 5 marks, 4 tackles. Like he just had a normal game. He only played 67% time on ground.
Yeah, he's a low percentage time on ground. Sort of
I think Guthrie and Dangerfield are probably their mainstays. They're two big dogs. Otherwise, you do have a lot of players that can go through there. Parfit, who's on the list. Bruin.
Atkins.
So I think Tom Atkins is definitely going to get more run in there as well. And then you look at players who didn't play. People are saying Jack Bowes might get run through there. I think there's just a lot of mouths to feed still in that midfield. So, look, don't get me wrong. I do like Tanner, and I do think he can do the things, but I don't think he's as safe as what people are
definitely
assuming
not safe
as well. All right, so who else do we want to talk about here? Tom Stewart scored 91. I don't think there's really much to say there. I mean, I don't think we can argue that Tom Stewart's a bad pick, but I don't think he's a particularly sexy pick. Asava, 49 points, 10 disposals, just 3 of them marks, 1 tackle. So he's obviously locked into that back line now that Henry's got an LTI. Is probably going to miss for a month or two. I think the ruck cover is now the only thing standing that is like attractive about Asava, because the scoring potential doesn't exist, and when Jack Henry gets back, the job security doesn't exist either.
It's hard to argue a spot for him in your side when some of these other forward rookies have been like looking really good and are cheaper than him, and he doesn't look like you can field him, which means you're paying $170K for him to sit on your bench. I agree. I think it's just a ruck cover pick, and it might be okay to have, but at the same time, if you have copper ruck injury, you just kind of trade them, don't you?
Yeah.
So I don't love it. Let's put it that way.
No, I don't love it at all. I just think it's such a premium to pay for something that might happen, and he's just not gonna make you the money in the meantime. It's not like he has this like win-win scenario where he either covers you or he makes the money anyway. Like he's just not doing one of those things, and he might not even do the other. So, I think it's a hard sell. That's gonna do me with this game. Did you have anyone else you wanted to touch on?
Not at all.
St Kilda versus Essendon was the next one. A super high-scoring affair with a combined 13 goals between these two teams. We're going to start with Rowan Marshall, who's the biggest lock in the game. Everyone who's listening right now who doesn't have Rowan Marshall, just go click him into your team. And if you still don't, then go follow me on Twitter. And, that's a win-win for all of us, I guess.
Well, not for the people that have to follow you on Twitter.
Jack Steele, 17 disposals, 9 tackles. I know Ross Lyon is here, and he might have this newfound thing that he's doing with some of his players. Is one of them to tell Jack Steele just to not get the footy?
Look, I don't think playstyle has some impacts, but probably not that much, given Brad Crouch still had 34 touches. I think Steele just hasn't passed the eye test. It's as simple as he's either not trying, which it could be, or two, he's slimmed down, which we can see. And he hasn't looked great. So if he's not trying in the preseason, he's waiting for round 1, well, then I'm going to get a surprise in round 1 when he pumps out a 140 and be like, dang, he really confused me. I should have cottoned on to that. Or he's just going to be terrible for the first couple of weeks. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I didn't pick him because he looked terrible and I didn't fall for it. So it's either one of those two ways, JB, but I don't think I can actively promote somebody who just has not passed the eye test, even though the role is really good and he is getting 80% plus CBAs for Saints, which is a huge positive.
What about Hunter Clark? Did he pass your eye test? He had 24 touches, 15 contested disposals, which is crazy, but only 50% disposal efficiency. Really butchered the ball around. Only 78 SuperCoach points, but I think he has some of the highest potential out of all the defensive mid-prices.
To be honest, it was very different than the previous week where I think
he looked lost. He couldn't find the ball.
Yeah, it was just passing. I felt like he kept being in like no man's land and the ball kept just like passing over him. And then it was the opposite in this game, but they played Bombers and I think Bombers are not super great either. I found this game really hard to read, just like the windy conditions to the teams that were playing, the matchups. It's just really awkward, and I didn't have a great read of it. I keep jumping back to how Hunter Clark looked last week, and that's kind of making me think that he's a non-selection. But the stats, 15 contested possession, is absolutely nothing to be sneezed at. He could definitely be an option. I'm not here nor there. Sorry for being too close to the fence on this one, JB.
I also want to point out Liam Stocker, 19 disposals, 6 marks. I don't think he's as good as the Bulldogs guys who we'll talk about shortly, but if for some reason Crozier doesn't get up for round one, or if you're concerned about Liam Jones's role, I think Stocker offers a really good alternative.
Yeah.
The only issue is where does Caulfield come into this side? I think personally he just plays through the VFL and tries to get back into the side via form. Maybe Stocker has bad form, but essentially it's like any other player. We're just backing them in to stay best 22 when they're in there. And I think Stocker gets first crack at that and will probably just go 70 plus, like approximately 70 plus.
Yeah, I think the risk I see with Stocker is that he's kind of pushed Ben Patton to play on the wing, but he was really good as a small defender. Well, I thought he was really good, at least, in the last couple of years. I thought he was really good at that role. So I don't know if Stocker's going to be better at it than him, but I think there's always risk that they just do a bit of a shuffle and put Patton back. And then, Stocker has to leave the side because of that. But yeah, I don't think it's a super safe selection, but I agree with what you're saying that I think that Bulldogs probably first and then Stocker's a fine alternative. But how did you rate Philippou in this game? I think that's the main talking point for me.
Yeah, 15 touches and a goal, 301 metres gain. He was getting up the pitch a little bit, 5 contested possessions. The thing that impressed me is getting through the 5 clangers and still having a respectable Dream Team Supercoach ratio, that is. So 5 of his 15 touches were clangers. He went at 46% disposal efficiency, but he looks cleaner than that. He had 80% time on ground, so he clearly ran the game out just fine. I think he has the potential to average about 60 and has some really nice spike games. So he sort of comes to me as a perfect bench guy if you have that money to sort of spend up and sort of secure the role, because his job security is rock solid. So if you're looking at potentially Davey at F8 with Chesser at M10, whatever, I think the potential to get Davey into the midfield and then Philippou over Chesser essentially is going to help your job security 1,000 times. So I don't know how many other rookies are really appealing. I don't know who else we're going to talk about at this stage, but essentially I think he's worth spending the money for that reason, that little bit of security. And I'll be very surprised if he doesn't find his way to the price point required at some point, just with some nice spike games.
I think he had like a 44-point first half or something like that, and then just didn't score in the second half. Yeah. And that's pretty much what you expect from those rookies that play in the forward line when they can go big and then just fade out. But again, they're playing Essendon and it was really windy, so I don't blame him for missing kicks and having clangers because of the wind, but Bombers are a good matchup for him as well. So I find it super hard to read. I don't love the pick. I don't think he's... my opinion probably differs to you. I don't think he's that good. He's just, the job security is really important, and I definitely rate that and agree with you on that one. But scoring potential, I think, leaves a little bit to be desired there.
Lastly, Jack Sinclair, 59 Supercoach points. Did you notice Wangani Miller pinching a little bit of his role? Wangani
a
Miller
lot of his role.
23 disposals, a lot of the kickouts as well. Sinclair didn't play on from a bunch of his kickouts. It really looked like there was going to be some sort of like, oh, by the way, we're not going to play exclusively through this guy. I still think he's got a high potential to be an uber premium this year and still be good, but you cannot look at him and see any sort of value in that starting price whatsoever.
Is there value in selecting Wangani Miller as 303k, but is midfield only, knowing he'll get defensive status after round 5?
I don't hate it, but you're not selecting someone who's going to be a keeper, so the defensive status is like
irrelevant.
Neither here nor there for me.
Yeah.
But he scored 91 in this game. If he does get the same sort of chunk of kickouts, he had 5 tackles, 7 marks. The thing is, I don't see where he goes up from this. A 23 disposal, 7 mark, 5 tackle game, 600 metres gained is pretty bloody good for a sort of young halfback. I'm not sure he keeps that sort of energy up. I'd rather someone who is getting bulk CBAs like Setterfield or Warple, or someone who has like the real flash potential like Callahan over like a Wangani Miller, I think.
All right, well, talking about Setterfield, he had 25 touches, 6 tackles, 14 contested possessions, only went at 60% disposal efficiency, which is not great, but still managed to put up 119 SuperCoach points. How did you see his game?
I think he's a good player. I always sort of have thought he was a good player, and I think he was starting to show that at Carlton, and then they just became inundated with midfielders, and it sort of pushed him out. But not because they wanted to push him out, but just because you got Walsh, you got Cripps, you got Hewitt, you got Cherry, you got so many guys who have recruited to play exclusively midfield, and even then they struggled to fit Cherry into that team. So Matthew Kennedy is another one. But Setterfield now at the Bombers, if he's one of their first rotation CBA midfielders, I can absolutely see him making the money. The problem is again, you're looking at him versus Warple, 70k difference for two guys who have similar roles and
There's
similar
only
potential.
40k difference between them.
Is it?
Yeah.
I thought Setterfield was like 370.
Nah, 348. They're 40k difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not too bad. I still think the cheaper option is preferable, but Setterfield I think is a very good option. Very, very good option. I think he will definitely have no issues making his money if he keeps this role.
Yeah.
Do you think he keeps the role?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Bombers played with a really tight midfield core. They pretty much just used Shield, Parrish, Zeret, Perkins, and Setterfield. Setterfield had the fewest CBAs, but it was just heavily, I guess, spread throughout them. So the role that he had in this game, I would think he could have this role throughout the season. My, I guess, concern is that it's somewhat, I mean, it's 100% role reliant, and what happens if form dips? He already doesn't have that many CBAs. What's his other role in the team that he can play? Does he get pushed out to the wing and then just play as a pure winger? And then that's terrible, right? So he needs to, just with kind of like Taylor Bruin, it's more he needs to keep playing well to keep his spot in the side and be secure. I mean, I guess that's not too different than any mid-pricer, and you kind of pay for what you get there. How do you compare him with Warple now? 40k difference, like 1 versus 1 in the midfield. I guess you can throw Hopper into the mix as well, or any other player at that price point. Like how are you rating them?
Hopper is clear. I think every team should have Hopper, like without question. And then I don't know. I genuinely, it's so difficult there. I'm going to be the fence sitter on this one, and usually I'm not. But I could not, for the life of me, tell you A, who makes more money out of those two, or B, who scores more points this year. I have no inkling whatsoever. I think they both have good roles. They're both in teams that are bad enough to keep them in those roles for long enough for them to succeed. And I don't think either team is going to be particularly overly competitive or winning for the season. So I don't think there's an edge either way, that way either. So I don't know who I side with.
All right, well, I'll make a decision. I think...
Please do.
If you have the 40k, I think I would take Setterfield because I just think he's a better player than Warple. And if you don't have the 40k, then Warple. I think it's almost as easy as that.
Okay, well, thanks for that.
Yeah, it's not like a massive difference between them, so it's fine.
ADJ, Alwyn Davey Jr., 67 SuperCoach points. I think he's so simply either in your midfield bench or in your forward bench.
Yep.
Like, no questions asked.
Yep. You get
cool. Darcy Parish got tagged to a...
absolute buggery. 54 SuperCoach points. He got held to 10 touches, 0 marks, 4 tackles. Look, it's not great when you get tagged to smithereens in the preseason, especially when you're going up in round 1. Up against a tagger. That's my concern. Same thing as Nick Dacos, right? Like, it works so well that they team see it. They go into round 1. He's got Finn McGuinness likely lining up on him round 1. And that was enough. He was in my side, and it's enough to scare me out of the side, knowing that he got the tag over Zach Merritt. So,
well, funnily enough, I still don't know if that's the ongoing thing.
It might not be.
So it just makes me want neither of them. I think they're both super taggable, and I think neither of them are particularly taggable over the other one, and I just want neither of them.
Yep.
Lastly, I did skip over Jai Menzies there, 62 SuperCoach points. He's at a slightly elevated price. He got 9 touches but 6 tackles. He's just going to be that forward pressure merchant. Just being more expensive than Davey makes it pretty easily in Davey's favour, but is Menzies maybe in consideration over Philippou?
Yeah, they're about the same, and it's
Yep.
it's not much between them, to be honest. Like, you can pick who you prefer. You have missed
thanks.
you have missed a big name here though. Or if you go all the way to the top of the Supercoach charts for the Bombers.
Right, Jordan Ridley. It's because you started me off on Will Setterfield. 128 Supercoach
blames
points.
me. How's that?
27 disposals, 12 marks, 2 tackles. Sensational game from Rids. We know that he has this potential. We owned him in 2021 when he started off with those huge scores. That was predominantly due to the kickouts. He does still have kickouts, just not the vast majority that we saw that season. I think the issue with this game is that it is perfectly laid for Ridley to do well.
Yeah.
So the St Kilda forward line that he was up against was decimated. As we know, is decimated. There's no King. There's no Membry. There was no they've got 12 other guys who could be there who weren't there. So I think in a normal game against St Kilda, both teams fully fit. Ridley has way more competition in terms of
accountability.
Accountability is probably the better word for it. As to who he's defending for the day. When he plays loose, I have no doubt whatsoever that he has these scores in him. 120 plus, probably most times he plays loose. The issue is that so many teams are now going taller and taller, it seems. I don't think he has more than 5 to 8 games where he does that loose role. And that just means that the other scores, the 70s and 80s and low 90s, that just weighs him down so heavily and weighs his price down throughout the season. I just don't think, worst case scenario, if you don't start him and he's that guy that you thought he was going to be, you just wait till he versus a team with a big forward line, take the little price drop and then sort of get him in at like 540, 550. Like, you're not losing much money by not starting Ridley, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mostly agree with that. I think from my perspective, I had Ridley on my radar coming into this week, and he's now in my side. So my perspective on watching him from the previous week was, whilst he had to be way more accountable whenever they Essendon switched, which admittedly wasn't as much as I would have liked to have seen, he was the guy that was, basically commanding the switches. And for me, that seems like an important step for him to increase his floor throughout the season if he's just going to get these cheap marks and kicks throughout the season. And I don't know Bombers have talked a big game up about having control of the backline, and we haven't seen it eventuate at all. And I don't know if that's still their game plan. But if it is their game plan and they just haven't been good at it and they're going to stick with it, then that's a big plus in terms of Ridley's scoring potential for the future. So I think he might be not amazing value, as you said, JB, and you might be able to pick him up throughout the year at the same price. But if he fills a need in your side, I think there is upside there. And it's a little bit on, relying on matchup. So I haven't yet gone through his fixtures to kind of work out, how many teams are going to be playing 3 talls and how that will impact him, which I definitely will do before the season starts. But at the moment, he looks pretty nice at D2.
All right, well, in the meantime, you post those stats to Twitter. I think a lot of people just fall in love with his price rather than him as an actual commodity. And I think it's the same with Dacos and Hayden Young. I think so many people have gotten on that price, they find it impossible to go up and they find it too risky to go down. And I think they just stick themselves there and sort of don't move, and they end up starting someone who they actually don't love as a starting pick. Not to say that that's your case, Pistol, but I think I'm seeing that a lot in teams that are sent to me, and I say, okay, so what are your thoughts on Ridley? And they're like, I just love the price point. It's really good. It enables me to get this guy over this guy. And I'm like, well, you don't really want to start someone just because they enable an upgrade elsewhere. You kind of want to believe in the pick, especially if it's a premium and you're paying $500K plus. So I can understand saying, I'm starting Callahan over Setterfield just because it upgrades me here. And I'm like, fair enough. They're much of muchness anyway. They both probably make their money like that. That's okay. So
I think for your sanity, if you had no interest in Ridley whatsoever until this game, then probably don't pick him, because this game was windy and a perfect game for him. So all right, do you want to talk about Draper before we move on? Stop. No, please, let's not talk about Draper.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll get into the second half of the matches shortly. Alrighty, now we're going to move into the next game. It's Sydney Swans versus Carlton. Sydney taking the win here in convincing fashion. We're going to start with the man of the hour, Errol Goulden, someone who you talk about with Ridley. If you didn't have him in your plans beforehand, what are you thinking about now? I think a 188 is probably warranted in changing some people's mindsets.
It's enormous. It's not just the 188. Like, the way he went about it with 45 possessions and 3 goals against a team that's probably going to finish in the top 8 as well. Like, that's absurd.
It's massive. Like, how does he go higher than that? He probably won't for many, many years. But the role, I think, is the most important part. So 50% CBAs. He had a lot of CBAs the week prior and looked brilliant as well. I recall him kicking the first couple of goals in that match in very quick fashion from the midfield as well. He's the type of player that will absolutely explode onto the scene. I'm not sure if this is that time, and playing without Callum Mills, I think has obviously made him look a lot better now than if he had have played with Callum Mills this game. I think we're probably not looking at a 188 and we're not looking at 50% CBAs. The thing is, though, is that he averaged low 90s to end the season last year in a role that still didn't involve CBAs. Now, any improvement on that, I think, can gear him towards the 100 average, and he can easily be a keeper at such a cheap price. The problem that I have with it is that what if he's not? And especially what if the intruders just make him irrelevant pretty much 6 weeks into the game? Do you treat him as someone who's made 80K and you sort of jump off of, or are you stuck with him all season as someone who might be not quite in the top 6 but good enough? Like, where do you sit with the potential of him just not quite getting to that promised land?
That's the golden question. I mean, this is my thought process. I guess I'll just talk it out because this is a big topic. He played this game without Papley and Mills. Papley's important because he was getting about 30% CPAs to end last season. Played
well with them as well.
Yeah, he was really good, and he added something different into the Swans midfield mix. So I came into this game thinking that that's still going to be the case this coming year, in that Papley would still get those CBAs and that wouldn't change. But now I've seen Goulden's performances, and inclusive of last week where he was phenomenal, and I'm like, well, maybe they don't need Papley CBAs. And if that's the case, he could be up to 40% CBAs without even impacting, like without Mills touching him. So there's already scope there for improvement without Mills getting kicked out of that midfield. I think Mills can play anywhere, right? And he can play anywhere very well. So it's not even out of the question that he's not kicked out. Like, he's not going down to 10% CBAs, but he could lose 5%. And Goulden might get an extra 5, and then Goulden's pushing nearly 50% CBAs, which is kind of the role that he has in this game. And we've seen Goulden in his first 2 games explode with 2 130-plus scores. So the ceiling has always been there, and that's because he's such a good ball user, a good decision maker, and clearly he can rack it up. So you put all those in a nice little package, and I think, well, I'm either going to be on the train, and I'm either going to be riding it with what I believe now is nearly 30% of the competition due to his score, and he's either going gangbusters, and this is his breakout year, kind of like the Petrarca of the last couple of years, and that's a fantastic result. Or the bad result is he's still going to be getting an increase of CBAs naturally because he's exploded this preseason, and you wouldn't just put him back down to less than 10% CBAs. Like, he's going to get some more midfield time based on his performances early, and then it's just up to him to perform. And if he with those increased CBAs, if he's still going to go, as you said, kind of in the 90s and no man's land and not a top 6, then do you just deal with it at the bye instead and trade him out at the bye? And is that the downside? And you kind of just weigh up, well, am I going to get this Petrarca fast starter 105 plus sort of guy, or am I going to get a 90 plus guy? And I guess that's up to each individual person to consider, their risk tolerance, and if they are happy in their side as a whole, like taking into account all of your players and how many of them you are expecting to trade out, if they don't perform. So if you're picking, let's say, I don't know, an LDU, and you're thinking, well, I'll just trade him at the bye if he's bad. And then you've got a Tom Green, and you're like, I'll just trade him at this bye if he's bad. And then you're picking Cunnington, you're like, I'll trade him at his bye. And then if you're picking Goulden as well, it's like one too many players. You can't be trading 4 players out like that at their bye. You're going to need one of them to be a keeper. So I think if you just structure your side well enough that you're not relying on every player to break out and be amazing, like if you let yourself have the risk that, he can flop and you're comfortable with trading him out, then I think that it's worthy of him being in your starting side.
Yeah, I don't really disagree with any of that. I just think I think people fall in love with obviously the preseason games a lot, and you said off the rip that you're more worried about role than score, and I think this is a very score-driven pile-on by the community rather than role-driven or the sort of logical thought process into the role. And although we might come to the same conclusion, I don't think that's the energy being put into it initially. So I think it's very interesting to discuss. I currently don't have him in my side. I don't know if that'll change or not. I've definitely toyed with him in my side, but I don't think he's an essential pick. And I do see a world in which he still averages 85 to 90 and people are sort of left in no man's land. It's just the upside of the pick is good. Like, we do remember those high scores to start his career. We do remember what we saw last year with no CBAs, and we know that he's eventually going to break out. It's just like when is he going to do it?
Yep.
It could quite easily be this season. So definitely one to ponder. I think if you haven't considered him at all to this point, I don't think you're doing your due diligence, which I can never say. But if you have him in your team and you haven't looked into anything besides his score, I also don't think you've done your due diligence. So I think it's something to look into, both sides of the coin.
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
Now, besides Goulden, it's a bit of a boring Sydney team. I think I'm just going to move on.
It's realistically, Lachlan McAndrew, a couple people stuck him on the bench because he was promised, I guess, some ruck time, but he was used sparingly. He was used very sparingly, only 38% time on ground. So I think it's pretty much a non-selection at this point. So, it's no one that you really need to look out for. I think Matt Roberts is a rookie price player. He scored 47, but again,
I like him, by the way. He looked good, but he's not that guy.
Yeah,
yet.
I mean,
like,
Mills was out, and they have Papley out, and what's his Constantine, or if that's his name, that I expect to probably come into the side as well. So they've got.
You mean Will Gould?
I mean, maybe they have enough players coming in that I'd be worried about that. So yeah, just the Goulden from the Swans, and I guess that's the fun part for. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent here. Is
please don't.
Watching the Swans games live most weeks. It's fun having a potential like superstar player in your team that you get to watch every week.
Oh, speaking of potential superstar team players that you get to watch every week, Sam Doherty, 34 disposals, 11 marks, 4 tackles, 716 metres game, which is what he does, 87% TOG, 85% disposal efficiency. It played a good amount of midfield time as well, split them not evenly, but I think it was like 70-30 in terms of defence midfield. We don't know exactly what that split's going to be, but I don't think we care. I think Doherty threatens to go 115 in either position and threatens to price people out in either position. So, look, he's actually locked into my team. I've had him for weeks and weeks now, and this did nothing to deter me, by the way. Just in case you were wondering, this did absolutely no damage to him in my side whatsoever.
I think he's my number one ranked 600k plus defender. I mean, he's in my side as well. You've put forward a lot of compelling cases, let's put it that way.
Thank you. Well, I think that's just where we sit with him. We don't really have to sort of zone in on who Sam Doherty is, but that's sort of our opinion. George Hewitt, 129. No, I know this guy isn't really classic relevant, but I think he's going to have a really good year in terms of draft.
Why not? Like, why isn't he classic
that's
relevant?
The thing. I think it's just because they got so many midfielders that he's just not going to keep on getting this slice of the pie. Like Walsh and Cripps missed this game. But genuinely he could be.
Like, he went 110 plus last year.
We could be looking at him at his bye for sure, but I don't think you could possibly start him.
Yeah, the injuries,
the issue.
Injuries last year kind of scare me. I mean, he wasn't training, I think, until January from his back issue from last year.
But seriously,
yeah,
draft, he's going to go under the radar because everyone remembers him as remember when he was good in defense? Well, yeah, he's still good, and he's just a midfielder, but he's still good. We aren't any closer, in my opinion, to knowing who's going to play out of Alex Cincotta and Lockie Cowan. I think Alex Cincotta had the better game in terms of statistics, but Cowan is very, very hard at the ball. I think depends on really what they want.
Yeah.
I think Cincotta wins, in my opinion, because he's coming from their VFL system. So he's had a little bit more time around the club, whereas Cowan's a new draftee. But that's not to say either will win. I think whoever does win, I think we're safe to put into our team. Do you think they kick each other out all year? In my opinion, I sort of see one locking it down for at least a month or so, and then maybe with bad form they get kicked out. But I think it's pretty safe.
It's tough because I think Cowan was the more defensively minded player. So I wonder if they'll change it up based on opponent, which would be a real disaster.
I'd be pretty surprised. I think you want to give the kids a run. I don't think you want to just have them coming in. I don't think that helps anyone.
It's a tough one. I think I'm on the same bandwagon of just picking whichever one's named and hoping for the best. But I wouldn't be surprised if the better one was the one we didn't start with, and they just did a swapperoo in the other last 2 months, and you're like, oh well, I knew this should happen. But what about taking both?
Weight? Wow, that's what I was going to ask.
Well, I asked first, which that means you got an answer.
I don't like it because I think you're guaranteed one is not going to play.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it feels like more secure.
I don't like it.
I think you just back the guy who's named, and like eventually, if say it takes 6 weeks for him to displace the other, he's then a good downgrade target. Like I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah, I feel like we'll probably should know
They've
by
got
round
a full
2.
season of Zach Williams to have people fill in for.
Yeah.
Like they don't have anyone else on the list where they're going, oh, actually, maybe we put him in there. It's these two guys, and I think they're going to cover Zach Williams all year. So, like, just get one of them, and then probably later on in the season get the other. I think.
Alrighty, so Oliver Hollands.
Yes, 17 disposals, 6 marks, 1 tackle. Played on a wing. I don't know if he's secure in that role. I don't know if he's going to average well enough as a 166k player. I think he's got a few question marks, Hollands.
He, to me, looks really good. I think his outside run, his endurance as well, just up and down the whole day, is really good. I would expect him to average around 60, so he should kind of make the money, but he also has that really low floor, so he might, that volatility might mean it takes him a bit longer to get there or quicker. Don't know which way it will fall. But he, at the same time, has to also hold out Lockie O'Brien, which I think he is ahead of him to start the season. I don't know how long it will last, so there is question marks over picking an inflated rookie with iffy job security. I think he's okay for a bench slot if you're going super, super light in the midfield, but I think I would prefer to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I think you summed it up well there. There are like the Phillips, and then there's, he's not that far off the Callahans. Obviously, Ashcroft you're going to have over him as well. Mackenzie you're going to have over him. Like it gets very, very crowded in there very quickly. So I'm not sure where you squeeze him in, but I don't hate the pick. He's probably the guy like the Bailey Smith where we just don't pick him. He's like, oh, actually, this guy's really good. But no, I think he's just.
I think I still prefer Philippou over him.
Yeah, I would absolutely.
Just the job security there.
Yeah, the job security being the main factor. All right, that's going to do me for this game. Are we going to move on to the next? What are you okay? Are you good?
Am I okay? Just having a quick look at the list. Sard, no relevance, even though Zach Williams out.
Nah.
Okay. All right. I thought I'd ask the question.
Well, it got answered. West Coast versus Adelaide was the next one. Adelaide winning this one by a hefty margin. We're going to start with West Coast. Jinbi in 56% time on ground looked incredible again. If you don't have him, and if you don't have him on field, then you're a bit of a weirdo, I think is probably the best way to put it. Elliot Yeo, 78 SuperCoach points from his 20 disposals, 7 marks, 3 tackles, and a goal. I saw a lot of people getting nervous about Elliot Yeo on the back of this. Only played 67% time on ground, was clearly being rested a little bit or managed a little bit in game. I think that's natural for his second hit out in as many weeks after having so long sort of in and out of the squad or injured. He still was quoted a couple of weeks ago as the fittest he's been in years. I think he's fine. I don't think he's going to play 60%. I don't think he's going to be a sub out risk or anything like that. And the fact that we saw what we saw and he's still got a 78 is like, I couldn't see it as any more of a positive if I tried. I'm
still hot on Yo. I agree. I think he doesn't really need to go all out in a game that they're losing by 10 goals. And it's a practice game as well. And if this is not worst case, but close to it, and he still puts out a 78, well, that's going to average out well in his favour. So I'm not concerned.
Dom Sheed, do we have to talk about Dom Sheed? 73
don't
SuperCoach.
Think he's as good as the other midfield options. I think far worse. Okay, well, I mean,
I think it's far worse than Setterfield in terms of scoring potential. And I think his role in scoring potential is close to Warple, but he's more expensive.
So I think that's probably the main points. The role is decent. I mean, he had the second most CBAs for West Coast, but they did get smashed in the midfield, so it's a bit hard to judge. I don't
he got
love
the second most
I think
CBAs for West Coast.
He will make 150k. I'm quite confident in that. I just don't. I kind of feel the same way about Fife. Like, it's not a sexy pick. He'll just do the job. I don't expect him to do much better than the job. Whereas I think Warple and Setterfield have potential to do at least better than the job. I think he'll be a successful pick. It's just like a pretty bland one.
Are we overlooking Oscar Allen? Obviously, they lost by 10 goals, which is kind of what we expect to happen here or there during the season. But he still had 8 disposals, 5 marks, and 4 shots at goal for a 52. If his conversion is better than 1 goal 3, then all of a sudden he's sneaking up to money-making territory. It does appear that he has spike games in him. Is he just a more expensive Ben King? Is he Sheasel's just a better pick for cheaper? Where do we sit? Because I don't have him. I haven't considered him hard, but I see a few teams floating with him.
Yeah, I considered him actually. He was coming into the weekend. He was actually at my F6 spot. So the reason I was considering him is I think he's better than Ben King. I think just more years, I guess, in the system and not injury, coming back from an injury, and I think he's a really good player, to put it bluntly. My issue is West Coast draw after round 1 is like really hard, and I'm struggling to think where he's going to get that spike game from early on. I don't love playing GWS, Fremantle, Melbourne in round 4 when the price changed, and then Geelong in round 5, Port Adelaide in round 6. So I guess that's the first easy game. Round 7.
Wait, what?
Round 7. Carlton. They're just, and he's going to cop Wiedering. It's just like not a great draw for him to pick a spike game. I feel like if I'm picking him, he's going to end up peaking around the bye, which is fine. But I also don't really want to field him if he's not scoring super well. So yeah, I'm here nor there on that pick. How do you rate him versus Sheasel though? Because Sheasel at the same time can fade in and out of games.
So all right, this is why I think it's easy. So we just saw Sheasel start well for North Melbourne in a game that they lost by 10 goals to the Bulldogs.
Yeah, but then you get positive scaling.
Sorry?
If you start well in a game that's a blowout, you get positive scaling.
Okay, so he started well, but not well enough to start cashing in on positive scaling to an extent. But essentially, we saw him have a bad third quarter, a very quiet third quarter, and then he got moved back behind the ball. Not because I think he gets thrown around too much, but because he had a bad third quarter. I think that's a positive. I think if he's having a quiet game, Clarko is just going to do what he can to get him involved. I think he wants Sheasel getting as many reps around the footy as possible this year. I think they want to really fast track his progress, make sure he's ticking along at all times. And if that means he has a quiet quarter up forward and they move him down back, I think that is an absolute positive.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, but I think it's a worthwhile discussion.
It was, but now it's done. Campbell Chesser, only the 9 disposals, 61% time on ground. Looked very sub-risky, managey type of, not quite at the level, which is surprising because we saw good things against Port. But this is like absolute grim worst case scenario against Adelaide.
I mean, it's not like they've got this huge depth of really good, talented players to come in. Like, do you think he can survive a poor game?
Maybe one.
It's not great.
It's not great at all.
I mean, I feel like it could be worse. I think if you tuck him away and he's your M10, it's probably okay. I'm not sure if M9 would work out too well.
I mean, it depends, because like if you've got Davey in your midfield as well, then M9's really just price points putting them that way.
Well, no, but let's say you had Davey in the forward line, and then your literal M10 is Chesser.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe. I don't know. The DPP's handy.
But anyway, I just think if you have to make way, if someone has to make way, it's clearly Chesser.
Yeah, fair enough. I can't really argue with that.
Clark and Hewitt didn't get much of a run, so I think we can rule those guys out.
I got one for you on the West Coast side that you will not have thought about at all. Probably, maybe worth a discussion. Tom Cole, 68 points, 182k SuperCoach. I think it's part of that grand final side. He's missed the 2022 season. Played 22 games in 21. Wow, that's really confusing. And only averaged 55. But the year before that, in 2020, did average 67. If we're desperate and things on the team sheets in round one look depressing, and some players that we're expecting don't get names or whatever it is he an option to consider?
We know we're going to get Liam Jones, and I think Liam Jones is a better pick.
Yeah, okay. And probably McKenna.
We're confident we're going to get Crozier, who's getting over a finger injury, but we're confident. McKenna, we know that he's going to be in that first team sheet because that's what they've had all preseason, who I think is a better pick. Stocker, we think is likely. Worst case, Caulfield gets in over Stocker for some strange reason. I think he's better. I just think there are so many options ahead of Cole. Maybe in another year, he's that guy, but
it's true.
Gota probably also gets named, and we don't love his scoring potential and we won't start him, but like they're not even that far apart, those two. So
there's a world in which Cole just gets the 150k for the owners that pick him, and it's a non-sexy pick as well. And we just overlooked it, and that's what it is. But at least it's worth just mentioning if someone is running Yo at D1, which there are madmen that are doing that, and they need players to fill out their backline. Well, there's one for you.
We're going to jump into the Crows. Rory Laird, 151 SuperCoach. Like, genuinely no doubt that he's going to do bad things this year. Like bad things.
And by that, for the non-millennials, you mean good things.
Yeah, but like dirty things. Horrible, dirty things.
And for the non-millennials, he means very good things.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's what I said.
I'm the translator, yeah.
So, I mean, if you were worried about his price tag, just don't be. I think he's absolutely a brilliant selection, and I think underrated, under-owned, and maybe even under... Oh God, I can't think of another under. You're so lucky, Pistol, because that was going to be really funny. Jordan Dawson, 105 SuperCoach points, 26 disposals, 10 marks. I don't think we saw anything new from Jordan Dawson. I think he's just him. He's a 600k defender with like subpar value comparatively, and just he's going to do the things.
Comparatively to the other defenders, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree. Like, I sit on it how I felt a couple of weeks ago, that his upside best is like 114 average, but that's what Sicily averaged last year anyway. So if I'm paying up for that price, I want to take someone who's better value in Doherty or Stewart or whatever, or just pay for Sicily. That's what I would prefer. Yep, fair enough. Who else do we really talk about? I don't know. McCannelly got a run as well, 79% TOG, but only 38 points. I don't know a lot about him, but played in defense. I just don't think he's an option. It doesn't look like he's got the scoring potential. No. Probably not even the job security. I think Pedler scored 56 and kicked the goal. Nice. Roll's bad. And he's too expensive. Otherwise... There's honestly no one here. There's people that pass the eye test, but I just don't think they're going to be great SuperCoach options. And I'm talking about, I guess... For West Coast, it was Liam Duggan, and at Crows, it was Sam Berry. They both both weeks have looked really good, and it just hasn't naturally translated into like really good SuperCoach scores. I guess they could both be breakout. I think I'd feel comfortable in draft with them rather than Classic.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I think that's it.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, we're going to move on to the next game. It's GWS versus Gold Coast. We've got 3 games remaining, so thank you if you're still holding on for dear life or if you're doing this in a 2-part session, which I'd highly recommend. First, we're going to start with GWS. Josh Kelly, Tom Green.
This will be a long
Lachlan
one.
Ash, Finn Callahan, Lockie Whitfield, Stephen Cornelio.
Was this
all in
the
my team.
2-part session, just GWS?
Yeah, they're all in my team.
Oh my
Talk
God.
about it.
Did you just name
No,
like
they're
8
not.
players in your team?
They're not all in my team.
And Madden.
This is going to take a while, so I'm going to go through the easy ones first. Tom Green, we can absolutely lock into our sides. Like, if you already have Tom Green or were thinking about Tom Green, he's only shown you positive things to be able to lock him into your side.
I can't.
True or false?
It's just in. He's been in since team picker and he's not moved.
Cornelio, we might have to have a little bit of a discussion here, but he scored 85 Supercoach points in 61% time of ground. He was on track to be their first or second CBA midfielder, which is perfect. Didn't really go forward at all. 24 disposals, had a bit of a knee knock, more so described as a corky now. Will be good to play round 1. What discussion do we need to have here?
I think so. The discussion I've had in general about Cornelio is that out of all of the other premium forwards, he provides the worst value out of them. But that's not to say that he himself isn't value, which I do think he is. So it might just be worth going a bit deeper in the forward line to take advantage of as much value as possible, and that would include taking Cornelio. I mean, honestly, it's hard to say anything too bad about him. He's got this fantastic run as all the Giants do in the first 6 weeks. It's going to be very scary as a non-owner. I'm still on the fence. He's been out of my side for like the last week and a half, but he could definitely end up in there before the season starts. It's just, I think you see him miss last week and you get a little bit, anxious, and then you see a knee knock this week and you're like, oh no, is he old and he's been injury prone? Is he going to make it through the season? Is this just bad luck? And those are all the thoughts running through your mind. But at the end of the day, he still scored 85 points in 61% time on ground. If you were to extrapolate that for the game, I'm sure he would have turned up and didn't get out of second gear. So that's a scary proposition, regardless.
Yeah, look, he hasn't left my team. I'm pretty confident having Cornelio in there, and they have a very good run to start the season.
That's a lot of players to talk about.
I guess, can we get Lockie Whitfield out of the way?
Yep.
He scored 86, played a predominantly or exclusively halfback role, which is great. But he's midfield only. He's priced at 450k. He looked good early, but he doesn't have quite the kicking that he had or that he displayed earlier in his career when he was a super uber. So I think there's still just enough risk that he's not going to be that guy. To just warrant not starting him in your side. I think would be so risky to start him in your side.
Yeah, there's a lot of mouths to feed off that half-back line for Swans now with Ashen coming down there. I mean, it's just, my concern is the ceiling gets a little bit capped when you're spreading it between so many good running half-back players. So, yeah, for me, we'll wait and see how he's going throughout the year, but I don't think it's a starting selection.
No. The next guy I think we should talk about is Finn Callahan. All right, so this is one of the 2 big ones that we're going to discuss.
All right.
So he played exclusively on a wing, had about 0 CBAs. He had 22 disposals, 6 marks, a tackle, 2 goals. Played out of his skin, 90% efficiency, only the 1 clanger for the match. I'm pretty confident he ticks away and makes his money, but not in this fashion. I don't think he has this type of consistent ceiling. This seems like a real perfect storm, great circumstance type of game. I don't think GWS have beaten many teams by 10 goals either. I just see the wing role as something that's going to churn out a lot of inconsistent scores. So I think although he does get the money made, I think it's a lot more of a slow burn than what we expected previously.
We probably don't want it to be a slow burn with that fixture run to start the year. You're probably hoping he starts hot and makes it very quickly. I guess my concern is if you're right and it is a slow burn after the fixture run and it turns and it gets harder for him, that doesn't sound great on paper.
No, it doesn't at all. I think a lot of people put him in their sides following this game. I actually found a way to take him out of my side following this performance, just because of the role. It's purely role dependent. As you said, the points aren't like uber relevant at this point, especially in the preseason. And it's great that he can play well on a wing, but the no CBAs is real. Like it's not a good sign for what he's going to be producing during the year. And I don't think he suddenly gets up to 20-30% CBAs for round one after getting none in the preseason.
I think talent can often shine through, but it is really hard for a winger to be consistent. And, I think he still has to average, 77 odd off the top of my head for him to make that 150k. And whilst that's in the realms of possibility, not many first/second year sort of players come in and do average that. And he doesn't, and the ones that do don't even do it from a good role. And he doesn't have a good role. So I'm not, I guess, loving the pick as much as I'm seeing him in like every 2 in every 3 teams has him, maybe 3 in every 4 teams. Yep. I'm seeing have him, and I think that might be a little too much for my liking.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I didn't expect that to go there. I thought I'd get some more pushback from you there. Josh Kelly, the last player in this GWS seems to talk about. There's only one or two.
There's more that we'll be talking about. Don't worry.
Oh no. Okay. Okay. Well, he's my last guy that I want to talk about. So just remember, everyone, that it's not me that pushes this on.
Yep.
138 Supercoach points, 36 disposals, 4 tackles, yada yada yada. Josh Kelly did Josh Kelly things. He was their leading CBA getter for the game with 26 out of a potential 35. I think it's quite clear that he's in. If he's not their first guy, and if that guy is Canelio / Tom Green, he's like a close third, the second or third. The thing that gets me is that they clearly had a 4-guy rotation with the 3 that I've mentioned and Perryman, and then I think is it O'Halloran? Is he a player? He was the next guy who he was the next guy who got a few, but very, very few CBAs as well. Yep. So it's really, it seems like a tight 4-man rotation, and that's just incredible for all guys involved because we know that these guys have the pedigree. Tom Green is going to show us this year. We hope Canelio has done it in the past. Josh Kelly has done it in the past in those roles. Yeah,
to keep the long story short, I think I'll be picking Jelly over Oliver for 4 of the last 6 years. Quite confident in that, unless I don't think anything's going to happen, and I'm going to get egg on my face for the 4th time in 6 years because of that. It's just the perfect storm of the early fixtures, the CBAs. I mean, Jelly leading the CBAs is just mind-blowing given the last 2 years he's been more of an outside role. So for him to get that inside role where we know he's a 115 sort of guy just screams value for me. So I'm in again. Oh no, here we go again, JB.
You love doing this.
Oh, do I love it? I feel like I'm in so much anguish, but I just keep going back to it, and then I feel silly, and I talk about on the podcast how I've done it again, and then people laugh, and that's just on my cycle of my Supercoach playing of the last half a decade.
So who's this mysterious man that you wanted to discuss from the Giants side?
There's 2, actually. So they're both, I think both are options.
Is it Ashton Cumming?
Well, yeah. So I love Cumming, and Cheetah's definitely not going to edit that out of the podcast.
No, well,
I will rephrase. Isaac is very good. He's underrated. 118 Supercoach points. The reason I'm saying he's underrated is he got some kick-ins stolen from him by Himmelberg last season, and Himmelberg has been playing pretty much as a forward in the entirety of this preseason, which means that you have that value, that built-in value from Cumming already. Now, I know Whitfield's going to move back and Ash is going to move back, and that, again, is the mouths to feed problem, but they also do share it around. And when you're sharing it around, plus you're the guy on kickouts, you're still going to be one to excel. And he's priced kind of in that range of those 500K players that we're looking at, but he's only in, I think it's in under 1% of teams. And I just don't think when you're choosing players in that price range, he should be the guy that's in under 1% of teams, because there is that natural upside. I know people are scared that Himmelberg might move back, which obviously might happen at some stage of the year, but it also might not happen. And then you've got a guy who's genuinely in contention for the top 6. I mean, people forget he was averaging 105 until Himmelberg moved back. So there is a lot of upside in the pick, and for him to barely be in any teams is, I guess, a little bit surprising for me, JB.
Okay, I can see that. I can see the upside. It's just, I think it's tough to sell over the guys who are above or below him on price. And the problem is we don't really know how Ash and Whitfield are how they're all three going to affect each other being in the same defence. I know we saw it to this game as being coming in Ash is going to score well and Whitfield wasn't, but that could easily switch on a game-by-game basis. So, I find it interesting. It's going to be something to monitor, but I don't think it's one for our starting sides. Ash as well, I can't trust Ash, but 69% time on ground for 30 touches and 130 Supercoach points is nuts.
And a high draft pick. Super high. So the talent's there. Yeah. Well, we're talking first couple picks. Like he now has the role that he probably should have been playing of the last couple of years, and he's priced in that same midfield price bracket as those other mid prices as well. Is there an argument to select him over any of those mid prices in that bracket, knowing that he'll get DPP?
I don't think the DPP is really I don't think that should be your allure, because he's not a premium. It's not really going to affect much. It might help you trade him out later on down the road.
Yeah,
but
it could be
it's not really
D6 until the buys. He's got the last buy.
I guess so, but that depends on what you're expecting him to score. Do we expect 130 and 69% time on ground?
Yes.
I don't think so. Do we expect 80 plus? There's potential for that. I'm not going to talk anyone off of Ash. I guess how does he compare to Setterfield and Warple is probably the better question.
I mean,
how many GWS players can we have is maybe a better question than that.
It's a large. I mean, they had 1834 of the pie, which is a very large split. That typically, I don't think you would have that much of a split. It was a thumping, but he doesn't need to go 129 to be a successful pick. He just needs to tick away at 85 plus. Well, maybe not, maybe probably 87, 88, which I think it's in the realms of possibility. I mean, there is a world in which Ash is the guy instead of Whitfield, and Whitfield peppers the 85 range, and Ash is the one that goes 95. I don't know if that's right now and that's the world we live in, or if it's in a different multiverse, but you need some guts to pick it, but I do think it's viable. Just not for me.
I think it's viable. Do you have his price there, Ash?
Yeah, I think it's like 330. I don't have it there.
It's right in that range, though.
Yeah.
It's right in that range, though. I think it's very interesting. All right, we're going to move on to Gold Coast. This is getting out of hand, this podcast. We've still got 2 games to go. So Sam Flanders, 30 disposals. This is going to be another one that we're going to have to talk about in length.
Please.
Played half forward. Essentially no CBAs. I think he got 6 out of the 35 for the match. So that obviously didn't assist his score. A lot of people, I think, worried that because Took Miller missed out, it means that this guy was getting all those CBAs. Not the case. To do that from a half-forward flank, I think is super unique and very impressive. But I have to wonder about the longevity of him doing so in such a role. 103 Supercoach flat. I know they got flogged, and I don't expect them to be on the end of, I guess, too many floggings this year. But I just find it really hard to quantify. This is not a role that produces high Supercoach averages, and we need him to go 75-ish, 80.
Yeah, I think.
Is he averaging 80 from a half-forward flank for the Gold Coast? And he didn't have a goal this game either.
Yeah, about 80.
Someone who doesn't score a lot of goals, someone who does rely on disposals. Is he doing that?
Well, I guess so. If he passes the eye test this week, and he passes the eye test last week, but the roles are bad both weeks, but it's the same role both weeks. So it wasn't like he changed roles either. He did the same thing 2 weeks in a row. Does that help in the argument of can he do it week in, week out? Because he's just done it back-to-back weeks.
It does.
This is a tough one.
It does.
This is a really hard one.
I think despite him doing it back to back in a couple of preseason games, I still don't think it's logical to expect him to do it during the season. I think logic should come through and say that this is a very unlikely outcome, and it should result in him coming back to the mean at some point.
Well, so what? I mean, he could obviously, not taking into account, which I guess is a big thing. Let's pretend he's not, his team's best player every week like he has been. What do you kind of expect him to average in that role? Let's say he's the most talented player in that role. What do you think he could average? Like 85?
80, 85, yeah.
And I guess I'm going to just put you on the spot here, I guess. Like, what do you think Sheasel as a first-year player is going to average?
75.
And they are approximately 50K difference in price, give or take. And that's about 10 points a game. So is he more risky than a rookie priced Sheasel? I don't know. I kind of feel similarly about both of those players, but I guess in a lot of those cases, I would tend to pick the cheaper one to minimize the risk. But I can't say I'm off the pick.
I'm off the pick.
I think he's my F6 at the moment, but I
know he's your F6, but. So the reason I'm on a Warple right now / Setterfield / actually Lockie Ashton's talking about him, by the way.
You're on all of them?
I'm targeting not as well as I'm targeting role more than anything, and I think if you put Lockie Ash, Setterfield, Warple, Jack Zeeble, Flanders, and Callahan all in a list and say, all right, now rank these in terms of best role through worst role.
Yeah.
The bottom two, I think, are Callahan and Flanders easily.
Probably.
So it's like, how can you justify spending the extra on them and trusting them to do something that is rarely done?
I guess they're the cheapest. It just doesn't seem logical out of those mid prices.
It's true. They are the cheapest too. So it brings the question forward as to whether you spend up for the better role or whether you back these guys to sort of fight against the norm of what we've seen for years and years in SuperCoach.
I guess you feel a little bit better about the Flanders DPP, but it doesn't really add anything, to be honest. Like, if he was just a forward, then that's fine. I guess if he was just a midfielder, you probably wouldn't pick him. But it's interesting. You're going very much on roll, which is great, and I do recommend that. I've got Bruin and Flanders, who are both eye test guys. We have very different teams this year. It's going to be an interesting season.
No, I hope so. It's going to be a very interesting season. Like I said, there's a pool of 40 to 50 players, and you can only get so many in. So I do look forward to it now.
I don't think we have a resolution on Flanders. It's just kind of...
No, we don't. Just take in what we said and make a decision. Jared Witt's had a standing game. I think he's still going under the radar as someone who's probably going to be decent this year, 65% told for 101. I just personally find it easier to spend less and get someone with a higher ceiling, because I don't think his ceiling matches either English or Darcy. Now, separately to that, who do we have to talk about? Charlie Constable is just an absolute lock. I don't see how I can argue having him in any, not in any of your drafts.
Yes, it's just Ben King.
Yeah, Ben King played. He played 42% TOG. He had 29 points. He looked real good. He presented up the field a lot, which I really like to see. But, God, if he's not a sub-risk / human injury risk, then I don't know what is. I don't think he's worth the extra money over a Fergus Green or a Davey at all.
Yeah, so 50K is a lot.
A pass for me. Yeah, big time.
You could be spending that to upgrade your Sheasel to your Flanders. All right, let's jump into the next one.
Yeah, let's jump into the next one. So it's Bulldogs versus North Melbourne. Another one with plenty of talking topics, as per usual.
Great. We're flying. This is a
Liberatore
two-part podcast, I think. You're going to come back next week.
It might actually be. Liberatoria, 158 Supercoach points, over 30 touches. He might benefit from Dunkley as much as anyone, to be honest.
I was thinking that as well. I saw the scores. I haven't got to watch this one on the rewatch yet, but you think, okay, Bontempelli's going to benefit from Dunkley leaving and McRae is, but we all forget about Libba. I mean, Libba just gets more midfield time, I guess. But at the end of the day, last year he did have some of these good games as well. So he may have just played a great game. And don't forget, they played North Melbourne, who they're not great. They're really not a great side. So there was lots of Supercoach pie. I was saying that 1843 was a lot of Supercoach pie. Bulldogs got 1988, which is an extraordinarily amount of Supercoach pie. So
that's a lot of pie.
Yeah, it's hard to read too much into it. But Libba's going to be that 105 guy. He was last year, and I think he will be again.
Nice. Bontempelli, I think. Bontempelli is another one. He has not left my team all preseason. 145 Supercoach. We clearly saw that with Lob in the team. It just frees him up to stay in that midfield. No Dunkley rotations through there. I think he's so safe as an option. Now, how many of these guys do we talk about? Bailey Dale had 124. We spoke about him earlier. I think he's the type of Isaac Cumming option that could surprise, but I just can't justify the price when you can just spend up a little bit more for a Doherty or a Dawson, who I like a lot more than Bailey Dale. But I think he is one that presents as a trading option during the season.
How would you rate Dale versus Cumming?
I honestly can't.
Okay,
I think they're pretty much the same player.
Well, Dale's got the tag risk, but less mouths to feed, I guess. Or still mouths to feed because of the whole side. I don't know. It's interesting.
That's a really tough one. Jackson McRae, 118. Honestly, didn't look super inspiring from what I saw in the game, especially against North Melbourne in a 10-goal win, 118. I don't know about Jack McRae. I find him really difficult to assess. I think with McRae, you'd rather get his teammate or Lachie Neale or go down to like a Josh Kelly type of, or if you've got faith in Jack Steele type of situation. I really don't think he presents amazing value at his price. I think he's really just priced accurately.
Well, a couple notes just in general about the game, looking at the stats of it, is that there was a lot of CBAs compared to other games. And the main rotation was Liberatore, Bontempelli, and Bailey Smith. But they had a high amount. So I think there was 36 odd CBAs, and we've got Libba with 27, Bont with 25, Smith with 24. But then McRae had 23, Treloar had 18, and then no one else had any. So they had a very tight five, which we just were speaking about, a type 5, I guess, from GWS, or maybe they're the type 4. And anyone that's within those CBAs has potential of, scoring really well on any given week. So I think the role is not bad for McRae. I just think that then you got to compare him to, Bontempelli at the exact same price and, see which one you think's got more upside than taking the fact they'll get the same amount of midfield time.
I think it's clearly Bontempelli.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but that's just how my mind works, is you take all of them at the exact same mid-time and then which one's got the highest upside, I guess.
Oscar Baker, 22 touches, 8 marks, dominated. They said before the game that he wasn't actually in their plans to be best 22, but he played so well, so he's got to be a consideration. He occupied a wing and was incredible. There's no way he's not in their best 22, and he played really, really well. So,
who would have been on that wing?
I have no idea. I think they're just waffle.
It's a bit scary.
Taylor Dray and Ed Richards are the ones that sort of got little knocks, and Oscar Baker didn't replace either of those two lads. He had 85% TOG. He's easily their best 22. He's fine. An absolute lock to put on your midfield bench. Now,
is he better as an M8? Benching Will Phillips?
No.
Could you?
We just spoke about
benching.
We just spoke about how. Yeah, I heard you. We just spoke about how bad a wing role is. I think just because he scored well against North Melbourne in a 10-goal win doesn't mean a wing role is suddenly lucrative. And I think Phillips will get enough CBAs to just tick into the 70s as like a baseline. He's going to get around 70 most weeks.
That's a lot. Okay, fair enough.
Around 70. I'm not
sorry for interrupting.
Exactly 70 or 70 plus.
Continue.
Thank you. Liam Jones, 101, was very, very good with 11 marks in defence, and his return 92% time on ground. I think he's so easy to lock into your defence. I know a lot of people aren't running this slot at the moment, and to you I ask how, but really 19 disposals. He's not going to average 100. He might not even average 80 or 75 even. But he's going to pepper that 70 mark and make his money quite comfortably, I think.
There were 9 players from his team that scored higher than him in SuperCoach.
It's crazy, isn't it? On a ton.
On a ton, yeah. That's insane. But look, it was almost a perfect storm, right, for him playing North Melbourne. Zerha got injured. There were... the thing is, it's going to happen, right? Like, he's a really good read of the ball. He's going to take intercept marks. The whole reason why you're picking him at an inflated price is because of the spike game, not because of, I guess, the average. I don't think he's a guy that's going to just get 60 every week. Like, he's going to have a 30, but he's also going to have 100. And he's going to make us 150K. So I like the selection.
No, I definitely do as well. Next, we got Crozier, who did get a dislocated finger, which took his time on ground to 53%. In that time on ground, he said he had 79 SuperCoach points, 13 touches, 6 marks, 2 tackles. Now, we found out via the intra-club that he was in the defence's best 22, their 18 that they were rolling out. And it showed here today. They obviously rate him in their best 22, and he performed like it. I actually think he's better than Liam Jones in terms of scoring potential. I just think he might have some job security issues if he's like really bad, because he's been in and out of the side for about 18 months now. But I'm pretty confident that Crozier is also an excellent pick. And if you can get 2 of these guys, I would get these 2. If you can only get 1 of these guys, I would probably go with the job security safety of Liam Jones.
Okay.
Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm processing it. I think that seems reasonable. I mean, look, I wanted to see Crozier take a kick-in because he took some in the intra-club, but there just weren't that many kick-ins available, and he didn't take any of them. So maybe that brings him down.
I think if he's closest to it, he can still take 1 or 2 kick-ins a game, which is what it is. Neither here nor there.
Yeah, it's also scary picking a guy he's not fringe, but he's certainly not far from being fringe in a Bevo team where the magnets just get thrown around everywhere. I mean, Sam Darcy is the same price as well. How do you compare him as well?
Not well.
Not well, yeah.
Darcy's a forward. He's going to play forward predominantly, and he's going to rely on goals, which I think you can get spike scores, but essentially then you're looking at, like, why don't we start Oscar Allen for cheaper if they're the same type of player? Because you don't want to start those types of really tall, clunky forwards who need a bag of goals.
What about Arthur Jones? Rookie priced, 123.
He was good.
But
yeah, 17 touches. What is that, Arthur? Did I misread there? No, 9 touches for Arthur, but 2 goals. Yeah, he was crafty. He was good. I think if you're talking about best 22, he's much more difficult. And if you're talking about potential sub-candidates, he puts his hand up like immediately. I think he's that type of player.
Yeah, as a forward, it's tough. I agree. I think he's a big sub risk, but he was in the best 22 in the last week's match sim, and now he's still there, which makes me think if you take into account the pre-comments, I don't know how much weight you can put onto it, that Baker wasn't going to play, then maybe it leans to Arthur Jones being best 22, ahead of somebody like Baker, and maybe that's good for his job security, and we're overlooking him as a rookie option. But as it stands, I mean, with how well Baker played, I don't know how he's not best 22 now. And Arthur Jones probably does just chip away, and I still feel too scared to pick somebody who I think is likely to be the sub and could lose all the cash they make in any given week.
The last guy who I want to talk about, you might want to talk about Josh Bruce, but I don't. Toby McLean, 45 SuperCoach, 15 disposals, 5 marks, 1 behind. He, in 85% time on ground, was deplorable. He's lost his spot in my team. And you talk about someone who's a sub-risk, I think he's actually more so a sub-risk because he also has the experience to come in, play a role, go either midfield, mid-forward, forward, wing, pretty much anywhere on the field. So I actually think he represents him as a bigger sub-risk than anyone.
Yeah, they showed last year there were stats, and sorry I don't have them on me, that the sub was more typically used for like maturer players rather than the rookies. I think. Yeah. And he would fit the mold of someone being the sub then as the mature, I guess, game-changing X-Factor type guy that can play a variety of roles. So I think that's it for me. JB, before we jump into North Melbourne, I just want to say very quickly, Bailey Smith, whilst getting the good midfield rotations, and it's still same thing applies with judging each one based on getting the same amount of midfield rotations, his time on ground was lower than what it's been in the past, only 82%, where he usually pushes in the 90s because he's a workhorse, doesn't come off the field. So he probably, for those looking for that breakout contender in that 40K range, he was on my list, but I think I'm taking him off for now. I just needed to see him kind of a little bit ahead of the other guys to have a bit more upside.
Yeah, I tend to agree. That's fair enough for me. Let's jump into North Melbourne and we'll quickly fly through a few of these.
There's so many relevant players in North as well.
I know.
Oh my God. This is one of our longest podcasts of all time. It's right up there.
Okay.
And I'm doing it in 38 degree heat. Oh my God.
Well, my office started in nice, cool 19 degree heat, but it's only gotten hotter since.
Since we spoke about Josh Kelly.
Yeah, essentially from that point onwards. Jack Zeeble, 86 Supercoach, 58 Dream Team. He always has a good ratio, just due to the nature in which he hunts the football and gets the contested marks or the tackles or the pressure acts. He had 15 disposals, 2 marks, which is surprisingly low, 3 tackles, 2 contested possessions, 80% efficiency, 80% TOG. He is back in that halfback role. Not in a sense of he's an absolute pig and they sort of chip around and go to him at all costs, but still is the player who sort of runs behind his teammate and is the preferred deliverer from what I saw several times out of defense. And I think just the fact that Clarko does sort of favour an old head in defence. You look at the Luke Hodges and Grant Birchall's. Essentially, I think he does like a carrier that is a little bit older to come out of defence. And Zeeble, considering what he did a couple of years ago, has shown that he is capable of doing that role. It just won't be as much of the chip style that gets him the points. It'll be more of the natural style that sort of sees him score well. So what do you see from Zeeble? Because I don't think there's a chance in hell that he becomes a premium, but I also think he quite easily makes close to the money that he needs.
Yeah, so I didn't watch the game, so I don't have too much to comment from the eye test wise. I just can go off the last week and also the match, the intra club, which I sat through, North Melbourne versus North Melbourne. He didn't, whilst the role was similar to the one 2 years ago down back, he really did look like he was 2 years older than when he had the role. He wasn't as, I guess, explosive. I just feel like it's slightly different and he won't be getting as much ball. And I know he averaged 100 plus back then. And now he's 2 years older. I don't know. I think there's still significant injury risk. I think it's in that same basket as Fife, where he probably makes you that 150K. I don't think he's going to go exceed it by much. And you just tick it off and you say, yeah, okay, he did what he had to do, and you get rid of him. I like that he's got the last buy. If you did want to hold him there, I think potentially you could hold him and just keep a spot free for an incoming forward DPP, whether that's go on Petrarca, Collingwood player, whatever it might be, and that could be an easy way to get there through somebody like him. So that's a benefit, but it's just a bit too old, too slow for me. It's not a sexy pick by any means.
No, not a sexy pick, but I think will be a good pick regardless for those who do choose to go there with that price point, which I think is quite attractive to people. Ben Cunnington, 79 Supercoach, 27 disposals, 3 marks, no tackles, which is surprising. 16 of his disposals were contested, which is crazy. He got 9 clearances. His disposal efficiency was 74%, which isn't too bad. His TOG was 80%, which you likely won't see go much higher. Yet he only scored 79 Supercoach points, which, considering he had a few clangers and some low TOG, you'd think maybe his dream team was higher. He actually outscored his dream team by 10 still. He had 69 dream teams, 79 Supercoach. Not ideal at all. I have really cooled down on this pick just because you kind of remember how handball heavy he was. And if he's not getting his 4 or 5 tackles a game, I think that floor really falls out underneath him due to the fact that he's just such a handball machine.
I think I called a little, but not for the same reasons as you. He was in my team, but I guess forgot what happens when North Melbourne get absolutely flogged. And I mean, as I said, I watched them in the match in the intra club, and they weren't hitting targets. And then I'm like, oh boy, what are they doing coming into the season? And I'm not surprised they got badly beaten. And to be honest, they're going to lose games this year by more than this, and it's going to happen more than once. And in those games, it just sucks the Supercoach pie completely, in favour of their opposition, and it just means all these Supercoach scores on the North Melbourne side, pretty much all of them are very low. And it kills you as an option. And his role is good. He got plenty of midfield. If people were concerned about that, don't be. I think he had 27 CBAs. Yep. So he was essentially a full-time midfielder, a tiny bit forward, but full-time midfielder. He's incredibly good at getting the first handball out, like the shovel handball. I think he might be one of the best in the AFL at that specific thing. But he's just slow, right? Like, he doesn't spread well. He doesn't get many, marks. He just gets those handballs and clearances, and that's how he gets all of his points. So I would still expect him to average around 90, and I think he's not going to make you 150k, but he's also going to score decent points. If you're picking him for the purpose of keeping him at F6 and trading him to Intruder, that might come in with the DPP and still score, 90s along the way. I think he can perform that role if that's why you're selecting him, and that's fine. But if you're selecting him to make money and then trade him, I mean, he will still make some money. He's just not going to make the full 150k. So neither here nor there.
I think that's the problem, is he sort of doesn't tick either box emphatically at all. Sheasel 72, we spoke about him already. I think we both like the pick a lot. LDU 55.
I like that he gets rotated when he doesn't get the ball. That's cool.
I agree.
That's really cool.
Davies Uniacke 55. He had the 18 touches, 4 marks, 2 tackles, a goal. Really low game from him. 90% TOG as well. He had everything set up, but obviously they got smoked. I think this is enough to say that he might just be too risky to start as well, just due to the fact that we don't expect North Melbourne to be good this year. We don't expect them to be awful, like worst team in the league, but they're in the conversation.
Well, I think it might be. I think I'd say they're close to it.
I expect them to be a little bit steadier because of the Clarko effect, but you're right. There's every chance they're just flat bottom of the league and getting that number 1 pick again. So I think that's enough for me to rule out Davies Uniacke.
He was in my first team picker, and I had him the entire preseason until this game. And look, if I look at it purely from like a, I guess, data perspective, I look at the time on ground and I say, yep, uptick. That's a breakout. When you're selecting your breakout candidates, you want someone that's increasing their time on ground. He's been doing that. That's a tick. Then you have the amount of CBAs he's in compared to the previous season. He was nearly in 100% of the CBAs. Like, he's the main man at North Melbourne. The role is perfect for a midfielder that you would want. So that's a tick. So he's got the role as a breakout contender tick. You've got the time on ground as a breakout contender tick. The only thing that's not a tick here, and it's definitely not skill, because that one we know is a tick, it's just that North Melbourne can get absolutely smashed and be left with 1,300 points in their Supercoach pie. That's such a little amount of points, JB. Like, it just sucks the absolute soul out of the selection. I would have been, if North Melbourne were like even like a 14th best side, I probably would still select LDU because he has all of the things that I'm looking for in a breakout contender. It's just they're really bad, and I almost when I redid my team after this weekend, I removed every single North Melbourne player. Like, I'm just like, no, I'm out. It's too much.
You just completely opted out of the entire side now.
Yeah.
Look, it's definitely concerning. I think they still do have, obviously, value there, and even in the flogging, they have a couple of players still putting up points, which they will do as well from week to week. Now, Josh Gota is probably the next one. Played a little bit of everywhere, mostly defence, 46 Supercoach points, 12 touches. I think we can rule him completely out as well. And that essentially, Will Phillips as well, 48 Supercoach points, 17 touches, a mark and 2 tackles. I think what this has done for Will Phillips owners is sort of emphasise that you might want to try and push him to M9 if possible, but you definitely shouldn't go without him.
Yeah, I think the role is what's important, as you said, and the 4 clangers, it's not great. I mean, he had 24 CBA, so he was the third most for North Melbourne, more than Simpkin. So the role is exactly what you want to see, and that's more important as a rookie selection than anything else. The clangers kept his score down. 35% disposal efficiency is terrible, but he'll make his money. What about Charlie Comben as a rookie option? 123k rookie, JB.
Yeah, well, he scored -3, which is the main issue for me. He gave away 5 free kicks, kicked to behind. He had 17 metres gained with his 6 disposals. We can't start him. He's just a bit too raw. Like, he actually will have games where he scores less than 30 points in a game.
It's crazy because CCJ got injured, right? So he's out. So Comben kind of has to play. Like, they don't have another
but
option.
he just doesn't have that scoring potential to select confidently.
And it kills, so Sherry, I guess people may have been looking at him as, I guess as a number 1 ruck with no other ruck in the team. But now, because Comben's been so dodgy, it means like Goldie might make his way back in the side, and then once he's in, he's rucking anyway because he's such a good ruck. So he's somehow destroyed multiple picks by his performance.
Nice. You love to see it. All right, we're going to move on to the next game now, the final game of the round.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much for bearing with us to this point. Now, this is going to be a bit short and sharp because I don't have a lot of players that I want to discuss in depth here. I'm going to start with Richmond, and I'm going to say Taranto for 500k is an absolute lock. He started this game butchering a little bit, and the I told you so's with his 15-point first quarter came out big time. And then he went about 110 for the rest of the match and scored 124 points. He's the easiest, or one of the easiest picks we've ever had in this game. Do not overthink Tim Taranto, please.
Any concern that he scored well once Prestia went off?
No, none. Absolutely none. Purely circumstantial. He hit more targets after Prestia went off than what he did with Prestia on, and that's it. That's all it is.
Yeah.
He was still finding the footy with Prestia in the team, like easy. Jacob Hopper, another one, 93. You just don't need to see anything else from him. He had a lot of clearances, a lot of contested possessions, a couple of tackles. He is going to do the things that you want your players to do. He's going to make the money. He's the easiest pick in the 300k category in the game. So just don't overthink it and put Jacob Hopper in your team.
Yeah, I watched this one today, and they ticked the boxes that I needed to see. I mean, Hopper's a bit slower than probably what you would imagine, but he doesn't need to be super fast because he gets his hands on it first and he handballs it out.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep. So that's going to be Richmond done for me. Melbourne, on the other hand, I don't know what I was watching in this game. I'm going to start from the bottom. Judd McVie, who is being touted to be getting the Salem role, had 81% TOG for a score of 23. I think we can quite safely.
Do you know who's going to get the Salem role?
Is it not Judd McVie?
No, it's Salem when he's back for round 1.
Oh, do you think he'll be back?
So. He's in full training, so I mean, he might not play round 1, but he's going to be there.
I was just going to say, if Judd McVie does play round 1, he's likely out round 2. So similar timelines. Beyond that, Angus Brayshaw scored 77. I think we can quite simply start the year without him if you were fancy on him. Brodie Grundy scoring 80 with 3 goals is quite damning. Now, I watched this game. He was very good, Brodie Grundy. He looked like he wanted every disposal out of the midfield. He spread the ground well. He kicked goals on his opponent, and he scored 80.
Yeah, it was
just goes to show that.
Right?
It just goes to show that the 50-50 split is just going to make it so difficult for either guy to score incredibly well consistently. I know we're going to get up to Max Gawn eventually, but I think safely we can say Brodie Grundy is not the one. If you were going to go risky here, I don't think Grundy's the one that you take the pick on.
I don't think so. I mean, things change throughout the season, and maybe they start to rest Gawn more, and he gets more time on ground. And by that stage, he might be a forward intruder, and maybe he's an option then. But to start the year, he played so well, and then I saw his score. I'm like, that doesn't sound right, but it is what it is.
I think 11 hitouts. They split hitouts 11 to 12, and Toby Nankervis had 24. So he out-hit out them combined, Toby. So I think that's going to be an issue, is them rotating through that midfield so often. I just don't think they're going to get a real crack at like dominating the hitouts. Usually with these players, Gawn and Grundy, you get 10 disposals from Grundy, 3 goals, and 35 hitouts, and all of a sudden it's a very juicy ton. I just don't think... I think that's just an underrated part of the game, which is now just heavily capped, I think, due to the fact that they're splitting 50-50.
The difference between Gawn and Grundy is the marking ability. I think Grundy has never really been a super strong overhead mark, and Gawn's been really good at it, and that makes a massive difference in SuperCoach points just because of how much a contested mark is worth. So for me, Gawn... He's not a starting option because he's overpriced, but at some stage we might be able to pick him up because I think he can still score well because he's really good at marking, whether behind the ball, intercept marking, or whether it's forward of the ball, marking to kick goals. But I just don't think Grundy has that in his back pocket.
Well, Gawn had 153. Might as well talk about him. He had 17 disposals with 8 marks, 3 tackles, 12 hitouts, 3 goals, 2.
It's a big game.
Very, 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 very good game. But the thing is, these games are going to interchange, and there are going to be weeks where Gawn scores 80, and his starting price is just way too much when you know for a fact there's going to be 80s that trickle through, and it's just going to kill his price. And players, if they do want to jump on, and if he becomes a forward intruder and they do want to jump on then, they will be able to get him for close to 70k cheaper.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. Total agreement.
Okay, so who else do we want to tick off here? What did you see from Clayton Oliver's role?
So this one was interesting. I watched the game today. So I was reading the chat at the time about Clayton Oliver off the halfback. So I kind of had in my mind what I thought that was going to look like, and then it wasn't quite the same as what I visualized. It wasn't as bad as what I had visualized in my head, to put it bluntly. But essentially, those that didn't watch the game, there was some bounces and some CBAs in which Oliver was lined up at the halfback flank. It looked like something they had trialled and practiced to do a rotation in the Collingwood mould, which they had mentioned before earlier in the pre-season. People gave me crap about when I was like, that sounds familiar. And they were rotating him with a dedicated, I guess, defender slash midfielder, kind of like what Collingwood does with Pendlebury and Dacos. And Oliver kind of sucked off the halfback flank. And you know what happened when he sucked? They just put him back in the midfield.
Yep.
And I was thinking, that's a concern. But the thing is, like, if you're not good at it, like, what's the point? He's like the best centre in the game. And I think over the course of the season, maybe they trial it early and give him a couple more times to kind of shine at halfback. I don't see that happening because he didn't seem to know what to do with himself. Sometimes he kept running really wide. Like, I'm like, where are you going? And then demanding the ball, but then like people like Sparrow would be like on the inner side of the wing, and he'd be like on the outer, and they would just pass it to the inner guy. They looking to get frustrated. From my perspective, it might impact his value to start the season, but it doesn't impact him as an upgrade target for me, because one, I'll be able to get him cheaper, and two, I don't see it lasting a whole season. I think it's a bit of an experiment, and they'll end up with their best player in the midfield at the end of the day. So that's kind of where I stand on it.
Well, it does sound like we've got a guy who is priced at 700k who could potentially score 105 instead of 130 just because they do a little bit too much experimentation and he gets stuck on halfback for a bit too long. That type of vibe. Yep. And when you're splitting hairs at that price range, I think it's enough to say I might prefer Laird, Bond, or some other guy, but essentially it's not the type of information where you go, oh my God, we absolutely cannot start Clayton Oliver anymore.
He'll be a top 5 player in the game.
Easily.
In the game,
Yeah,
not just
easily.
the lane. So you can lock him away and not have to think about it for the whole season.
I think that's going to do me. I know they've got Petrarca who played all right as
Yeah,
well.
let's talk about Petrarca.
Well, he kind of splits time still between midfield and forward. He's the type of guy who, even last year where they started undefeated for the first 2 months, he was still able to get picked up at 480k at some point. So I just think he absolutely has the ability to be cheap every single season. And we always start the year by going, oh, remember when he had that niggle last year and he got cheap, and now he looks incredible this preseason, and maybe he's justified. He just doesn't. There's always something with Petrarca that gets him to a really affordable price. And I don't see why this year would be different. And if it's not, he's priced adequately, and we pick him up around his buy for that.
I think the exciting thing for me about Petrarca is, given the amount of people that Melbourne were willing to run through the middle, I mean, Harms was their leading CBA mid, and then they had Kasaya Pickett on nearly just 2 less CBAs than Petrarca, and Sparrow 3 less than Petrarca. It makes me feel like if they're trialing stuff early, Petrarca's a good chance of getting DPP and becoming a forward. And that would be a massive inclusion into our forward line. He becomes an instant must get. Their run as well from rounds, I think 4 to 10 is really good. And if he's going to get DPP in that range, and he's somebody who's essentially been a flat track bully in the past, he's going to become a must have at that round. So yeah, definitely interesting things to think about when starting your starting team structure.
Well, I think that'll finally do us.
Yeah, I don't think we need to talk about Bowie or Pickett. I mean,
No, just don't even mention them. Essentially, next week we're going to be doing a Slack Q&A, which will be broadcast as a normal podcast. Obviously, we'll be putting that out hopefully next week, where the Slack, the people that are in our Patreon in Slack are going to drive the questions, and we're going to try and answer them as best we can. Hopefully, that one takes less than 2.5 hours. I can only assume it will, but if you have listened to this point, thanks very much for tuning in. You can find Pistol at Pistol_DRSC, myself at JB_DRSC, and Chizo at Chizo with a Z at _DRSC, and then the main page Dr_SC, which recently clicked over 10,000 likes. So again, thank you for that. We will be putting out a couple of YouTube videos between now and the start of the season, so make sure you follow us over there on YouTube as well. Pistol, do you have any closing statements?
We're going to talk about Tyler Young.